A very good morning, everyone. Indeed, a beautiful morning to see such lovely faces in the audience today. I'm so excited for today's event. Thank you all for joining us today for Construction Week's inaugural Women in Construction Conference. Now, as the editor of Construction Week Middle East, which is a part of ITP Media Group, I sincerely believe this conference will be a catalyst for change and a means to engage in insightful conversations about women's representation in the industry. Today's event, I should say, was eagerly awaited not only by us at Construction Week and ITP Media Group, but the entire construction industry. We believe there is not just one day to create and provide opportunities for women in the sector for the sustainable growth of the industry. I believe the time is now, and it is now that we must take the right actions. The Women in Construction Conference also comes at a time when the region's construction industry is making strides by addressing issues around diversity and inclusion, as well as finding the right solutions to fill gaps on the road to equal representation. We have observed and closely analyzed how the region's construction stakeholders are cautiously taking steps to improve their approach to diversity and equality in the workplace, and how the pace of this movement has accelerated over time. We learned that while this is an ongoing process, great progress is being made by many organizations, with many more joining the journey and realigning their hiring and workplace policies to strengthen women's representation across the board and on the site. For today's event, we have an interactive platform for everyone, which is called Slido. And through this platform, you can get more involved with our panel discussions by sending your questions that you would like to ask each of the panelists after each panel. So all you have to do is scan the QR code right in front of you on the table using your phone, enter your name into the home screen, and start posting your questions after each panel discussion. Now, as we inch closer to the start of our discussions this morning, I would like to express my gratitude to our events and conference team for organizing today's event. And I cannot forget at this point to also thank our wonderful sponsors and partners for their continuous support. Construction Week is bringing to you today's conference alongside our platinum sponsor, RMD Quickform, our event sponsor, Kandil, and UN Women as our partner. Please put your hands together for our sponsors and partners, ladies and gentlemen. Now to the Construction Week team, construction is not just limited to one topic. It is indeed a reality even within our team, I would say. It was and will continue to be a spotlight in every facet of the industry. Our coverage of women's achievements, opportunities, and growth initiatives, challenges along the way, and everything in between and beyond will always be a key focus. And on that note, I would like to kick off today's conference this morning and invite Susanne Mikhail, Regional Director for Arab States at UN Women, to deliver today's keynote speech. Welcome to the stage, Susanne.
Good morning, dear friends. It's such a pleasure for me to be with you here today. And can I say, I have been in Dubai twice now for the past 10 days. Last time, I was also here with ITP Media Group, with whom we work hand in hand with a great, excellent collaboration in the area of gender equality. We were here celebrating a number of women from the United Arab Emirates who have shown tremendous, remarkable achievements in their respective field. This was for the Arab Women Award that was given and handed out 10 days ago. What struck me is something even more important than the individual achievements. For each of these women, and for you as well in this room, of course, the achievements are not only relevant for their respective field, but these women's and their achievements in their respective fields in conjunction and together, have brought nations upwards and forward. And in this case, the nation of United Arab Emirates. I think a lot of the scientific team that's behind the first exhibition from an Arab states to March, earlier 2021, 80% of that team were women. So it gives you that tangible example of women in various fields and the direct correlation that is now evidenced throughout the world, correlation between women contribution and advancement, economic advancements of entire nations. If we look at the 10 richest countries all over the world, all of them, I would say 98% of them, fare very well in gender equality indices. But still, we're struggling to attract and retain women in a number of fields. And we have very good reasons for that. Until this very day, women actually manage 2.5% more or times more the internal care, what we call the care burden at home. So that's a great challenge to actually enter the workforce. But also to retain women, as we know, is a tremendous challenge. One of the reasons is the pay gap that was alluded to earlier. It would take us 136 years to close the pay gap in the current rate. And of course, this is a tremendous loss, as we were saying. Nations are losing because we've invested in education and higher education. But also, as you know better than me, companies would be losing as well. We all know the latest evidence that show us that companies with 30% or more women in leadership positions have an increased profit of 6 to 25%, depending on which country you look at. But also companies that have higher level of diversity have a 70% increased chance to enter new markets. So the figures, the numbers are really speaking a clear language. Now to the good news. The good news is that throughout the Arab states, the region I am responsible of, there's a tremendous and heightened attention towards women economic empowerment and increasing the number of women in labor workforce, both entry and retention and advancement to the higher ranks. And this is an industry that I'm very, very excited about because I know that it's traditionally been male-dominated, but just the fact, the surge of women in the construction industry is tremendously, tremendously positive for many reasons. I'll tell you something about myself. It's a little bit personal, but my background is humanitarian. So most of my years I've been worked in either war zones or famine areas. For me, construction is more than construction. It's about building nations. It's about really putting a profile on different cities, both big cities, smaller villages. It's being part of overall development, social development and economic development. And following closely through our collaboration with ITP Media Group, what is happening in the construction industry in Dubai, in the GCC, but in North Africa and the Middle East overall, I can be only encouraged. I have to say that it's again a great pleasure for me to be with you all here today, and I applaud you all for the tremendous steps many of you have taken, either through signing the women empowerment principles or through other means, in terms of the 3 key areas that I alluded to earlier: attracting women to your industry, retaining women in the industry, and advancing their positions. Because again, there's only profits to be made. Very, very thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Susanne, for those inspiring and positive words. And reflecting on what Susanne just said, I believe it is a collective responsibility of both male and female members of several industries across the region to create a more inclusive environment for women to not just survive, grow, but thrive as well. And on that note, we move on to our first panel discussion today, where we will look into some thought-provoking discussions where we examine whether there are sufficient policies for gender-balanced environment and address the immediate gaps that we need to fill in the industry. Please join me in welcoming the panelists for this session onto the stage. We start with Olga Litkowetz, Director of Business Development and Marketing MENA at Kraknel. In her role, Olga chairs Kraknel's wider MENA Management Board, and as a director, she plays a pivotal role in the strategic development of Kraknel's regional business and operation management. Thank you for joining us on the stage, Olga, today. Please give a huge round of applause for Olga, ladies and gentlemen. Also joining us on the panel this morning is Shuruk Hamawi, Regional Communications and Marketing Director, International Development, South Asia, Middle East, and Africa at Mott MacDonald. Shuruk leads on all thought leadership and campaign-based marketing activities at the organization. Thank you for joining us today, Shuruk, and a round of applause for Shuruk, please. Next up, we are joined by Jane Miles, Senior Associate at Reedsmith. Jane specializes in construction and engineering as well as dispute resolution with over a decade of experience in the GCC. Thank you for joining us, Jane, and a huge round of applause for Jane, everyone. And our final panelist for this session is Amir Menimne, Vice President of Urbanism and Planning for the Middle East and Africa region at AECOM Middle East. Amir drives growth at the organization by ensuring clients receive the best of the firm's technical practice, quality design, and innovative thinking. Amir is also committed to growing a diverse and inclusive team to support AECOM's vision. Welcome to the panel, Amir. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on the panel discussion today. It indeed is quite exciting, as I said, to see you all. Now, to start off with, I think it feels positive to start today's conversation exploring ways in which adaptation of new policies as well as the realignment of existing policies have become integral to retain and attract women in the construction sector. And on that note, and with these points in mind, let's begin our conversation today by understanding from each one of you on how have workplace policies evolved over the years to not just bring in more women in the industry, but also influence their representation across the sector. Let's start with you first, Olga.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ranju, for bringing this very important topic. And I just sit here and look around, and I don't know if we need to do a lot of work. Look around, it's all women here, almost all, and thank you for all the men who came to support us today. And I think if we look at any industry that places any restrictions, visible or invisible, on for their roles that are just for the half of the population, just for men, let's say previously as it was, limiting themselves and putting those barriers to incredibly bigger talent pool, yeah? Because if we are tapping into wider society, a wider talent pool, we are creating that commercial productivity. So having gender diversity and focusing on diversity has become just inevitable change that we all had to make. At some point, construction industry woken up to a reality that we have not progressed as much. We have not innovated as much just because we were so single represented, yeah? And if you look, there has been a study published by World Economic Forum that a construction industry, if you look at the productivity of the construction industry, within the past 30 years, it's improved only by 2%. And if you look in comparison to manufacturing facility, it has changed by 30%. So we have really stopped our innovation just by not allowing more diverse workforce to come and collaborate and work together. So I think in today's world, we are seeing massive change. Companies are encouraging diversity, are bringing more women into the workplace, and working towards creating those cultures that are inclusive and creative and productive and create a great result for all.
Yeah.
And I think we will be focusing a little bit more on the actual policies later, so I will leave it there.
Yeah, thank you for those insights. Shuruk, what would you like to add? Do you also feel the same? You know, you've been in the industry for quite a long time. What has your experience been like when it comes to inclusivity?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Really great to be here today with you all. I do believe that policies have actually evolved.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've noticed is that we are now bringing more people, more diverse people to actually create these policies. And I think by that we are capturing different experiences, different needs, different stories to be able to cater for the different, really diverse setup that we have nowadays. We are seeing more policies actually that do not tolerate discrimination,
Yeah.
abuse, harassment, and by that we are actually creating safe environments for women, which ultimately will result in having more women in the industry by having a safe workplace. There's so much evidence again nowadays that demonstrate that inclusive workplaces are not only important for staff or people are not just only the right thing to do anymore, it's also good for business.
Yeah.
So businesses are also benefiting from that, and that means retaining more talents, having happier staff, dealing better with customers and clients and understanding needs around you, which again, at the goal end would be, of course, enhancing revenue at the end of it. Just quickly to touch on your point around increasing the number of professionals in this industry, I'm also very keen to highlight that this industry is not only purely open for engineers and STEM graduates. We do have a lot of women in the finance, marketing, legal teams who are equally encouraged to consider this field. And by showing role models of women who have actually developed and they took their career further in such sector, we are also inviting more women to be part of this sector and hence increasing the number of women participation and rates here.
Thank you for those points, Shuruk. And coming to you, Jane, obviously you represent the legal side of the business in the construction sector, and that side of the business has a lot many women. But what more is, when it comes to the legal side of construction sector, what more are you doing, to bring in more women in not just senior roles, but also in junior level as well?
Thank you. It's good to be here this morning and see everyone. As far as we sit, sort of on the outside looking in almost, working alongside the engineers, architects, contractors and so on. I don't have any first-hand experience about how these policies have evolved. I can only go on what my female colleagues and friends tell me who are the architects and engineers and working for the contractors. And what I understand, having been out here for sort of over 12 years myself, is that, that as you've said, Shuruk, there are changes, there are improvements. These policies have evolved, and I think that for women, things are improving. It does seem, however, that there is a disparity between organisations. From the experiences of my girlfriends, I understand that some organisations have really got to grips with this and they feel much better supported, whereas other maybe smaller companies haven't quite got to the same point in time yet. And so there is a disparity between sort of progress. So whilst it seems that some great steps have been made and are continuing to be made, there's no kind of levelling of the playing field yet, and I think that that's really important.
Yeah, that's right. And coming to you, Amir, I know AECOM has also pledged to women empowerment principles by UN Women, and you yourself in a leadership position, support inclusivity and diversity. How has it been for you when you look into the sector, and how are the numbers like for you?
Thank you very much. First, I just want to say it's sometimes when we sit on panels, we want to say the right thing always. But I'm not going to try to just sugarcoat the situation. I think what's happening really is the fact that we've seen some change in policies, but they're not enough. Policies that we have seen changing with time, are not enough to change the image and the picture of what the construction industry is about. So we really need to do a lot of work there to get to that diversity in gender. And throughout time, when we started moving into that industry, when we walked into that industry, we felt it from the beginning, from studies, from the days where we walked in. It was always a stereotype. It was always an image that we have that man on a site in a construction field, and it's not always been seen as a place for, it was always seen as a place for a thick-skinned man. So it is a lot to be done still when it comes down to policies to allow for that gender diversity to be retained.
Yeah, and I believe we need to have these kind of conversations, exactly leadership roles wherein people like you said it is important for you to be talking that to the audiences and everyone else associated so they get inspired and, start working on their policies as well. Yeah.
And to answer your question, in my role within ACOM in the leadership, I sit on the global ED&I steering committee where we are very hard at work putting together a global initiatives that allow and help us retain the gender diversity, but also to increase that in the senior leadership. This is very important. But how we do that is by increasing the pool of talent at the graduate level. And most importantly, we start from the schools, try to push together the gender diversity from school days, from orientation days, allow people to understand that there is no really place for gender differences in that industry, and move on with that time from this moment when we increase that pool of talent to get to the point where we have a larger presence of a diverse gender.
Yeah, very important points made there. And I also believe, like you said, and I think everyone here sitting as well will agree to what I'm saying, we need to do more, not just, we can't just be changing policies and realigning them. We should be thinking on how these are going to impact the industry as a whole and also increasing women's representation in the process. That is where we should be heading. And, remarking on those points, I also think that flexible working has been a very driving force when it comes to increasing the rate of female involvement in the field. And reflecting on that, I would like to come to you, Shuruk, and understand how is Mott MacDonald implementing new policies to facilitate flexible work programs, across the industry and the projects that you have?
Sorry. So I think flexible working is not the new thing anymore. It's something that we need to live with, something that while probably before some people, some companies were not open to it, now it's becoming a fact.
Yeah.
I think the key thing is to design systems, processes, cultures, technologies that can help us actually cut or eliminate any bias when we set up our decisions and our policies to be able to deliver flexible working principles and guidance. When it comes to McDonald's, we do have our own agile working principle, which is designed to support colleagues work flexibly and being able to cope with the change. We also have our own toolkit that is designed purely for managers to help drive the change and actually implement the policies. Leading by example is very, very important. So our leaders do work flexibly. But when it comes to working flexibly, we also take a lot of attention to our staff well-being. So working from home or remotely doesn't mean being available all the time or working all the time. That's something really important. We are hearing many, many women in specific saying that they are burnt out nowadays. They work nonstop with everything else they need to do at home and schooling and looking after kids. So we need to make sure that when we have flexible guidelines and principles, that also comes with a set of clear boundaries that people can actually have that right life balance approach. We also have invested a lot in the technology to allow people to work remotely. Just like Amir said, I do agree, the journey is way far from over. There's a lot of stuff that we are discovering every day. There are needs that we still don't capture, but we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. We do believe that if you put EDI in as the focus of everything you do, and you bring, again, different groups to the discussion. So what we do is that we do have certain groups of even at one point early career professionals, because it's not only the senior management that you need to hear from, it's different people, different backgrounds to actually come up with these inclusive policies. So we do value that. We also, now when we talk to new joiners or when we even advertise our jobs, we offer flexible working at the point of hire. So that's something we discussed at the early stage, and that's resulted in having more people actually keen to join. It's something that people want to use nowadays, and they are keen to join such open organizations.
Yeah, very well described, Shuruk. And I also believe such initiatives by each and every organization in the industry also brings that confidence in women, to stay in their jobs while also fulfilling their duties towards their families as well as their personal life. And reflecting on that, I would like to also come to you, Olga, and understand how is Kraknel working with the industry, to promote gender equity as well as equal access to rights and opportunities?
I think we focus our attention a lot in creating this inclusive environment. So we moved, when we started, of course, we focused on evaluating where we are, first of all, as a business. We realized that at some point, a few years back, we were majority of our leadership team, white male representation. We had enough women in the junior position, but there was that retention gap. Why women didn't jump to higher roles in the organization or in the industry itself? Well, because of that family commitment and everything that comes with it. So we've done the survey with our employees to find out how they feel, how they think. And then we've created a dedicated role and person and network around our business who are now driving that inclusive leadership and inclusive environment. So we are focusing a lot more on, let's say, not only gender diversity, but also on ethnic diversity, on cultural diversity. So we are focusing on creating role models. If, for example, Emirati women or black young girl look at our business, will she have someone to believe in or to look at and say, I can achieve this level, I can be there, I can see my career progressing in this company, in this business. So we looked a lot at the flexible working environment, same as in Mott MacDonald, which is great to see. But what is really important for all the inclusive environment and inclusive leadership to practice is it's not only creating the policies and creating policies for those who need to use them, but also for the environment around. So if there is a young woman who are just coming back from maternity leave, and she has this flexible working environment to come back to, great. But will others around her respect her for leaving a little bit earlier or having that really flexible working environment? Eliminating our unconscious bias, sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious bias towards those that work around us. And I think what we also focus a lot on bringing different ethnicities. So we've introduced Rooney's role at the recruitment process. Again, if we are just connected to our social circles, we might be only reaching out to certain nationalities or certain individuals. But if we are really challenging ourselves and saying, at every recruitment opportunity, we are challenging ourselves to reach out and casting as wide as possible to the different pool of talent with different ethnic backgrounds, different cultures, maybe even different locations in the world, to see who are the best people for that role because of their talents, not because of their gender or who they know or where they are located. So there are lots of work goes around this. And I think we've published this all publicly because we really challenged ourselves and we want to see that there's a lot of hard work that is happening, And I think what is great to see that diversity and that change that is happening within the organization, but within the industry itself, brings a lot of amazing new ideas. Our employees are supporting each other, this peer-to-peer support, mentoring each other. And together we are progressing to a much better, more creative, innovative future for us all.
Yeah, in fact, it also comes down to the point when we always say that collaboration is a key for the construction sector. I think even when it comes to diversity, whether ethnic or gender, it is important for both male and female members to collaborate and, realign policies and find the right solutions. On that note, I would like to come to you, Jane, and understand, how has adopting new policies to build a gender diverse workforce and environment helped increase productivity at Reedsmith?
Thank you. From my understanding, having only been with the firm since early 2020, in fact, right before COVID kicked off, historically, Reedsmith has been very much focused on not just addressing gender diversity, but diversity as a whole. And so we've had quite a few programs in place across the firm globally, which I understand have been very useful in exactly that, increasing productivity. And one of the main programs that we have is something called Return RS, which began back in 2018. And although the focus originally was to assist women coming back to work after having had time off for maternity, that program now is available to everybody. So whether someone has been absent from work for an extended period because they've had maternity or paternity leave, or because they've had some sort of illness, or they've had to take time out for some other reason, the program supports people coming back, on a sort of part-time basis, giving them time to kind of get back into, the habit of coming into the office, and they are fully supported. They're paid, full salary, even though they're only doing part-time hours to come in. There's no pressure on them, and that kind of helps ease them back in, and they feel like they can come back on their own terms. When people feel valued and appreciated and have their personal situation recognised, it makes it easier to come back, and people are naturally more productive. And one of the things I personally found, having joined the firm right before COVID and we all got sent home, was just how the firm's agile policy really helps. That for a long time now, the firm has had a great policy around being able to work from home or not necessarily from the office to support staff and let them do their job wherever and however they need to. And that worked really well for us. We were one of the first firms to go home around March time, and it was seamless. For me, that was fantastic as a brand new employee to the firm, being able to do that and knowing that, the partners that we work for trust us to get on with the job, knowing that you're trusted to do your job, that increases productivity. You're not worrying about things or how things might be perceived. You're allowed to just get on with the job, and that engenders huge increases in productivity because you're not worrying about anything else.
Yeah, that's right. And I also think with productivity it also increases profitability for the organization and even the clients that your organization is probably working with, which is again very important. When you're talking about representation of women, all these factors need to be considered, and I believe every one of us is probably doing that, when we are changing the policies in the sector. Now, I see you've been quiet for a while, Amir. So I would like to come to you, and I know that AECOM as a company, has been focusing on equal intake of graduates, year on year. So tell us, how has it helped to create a sustainable model for attracting and developing female leaders of the future in your organization and, generally in the industry?
You're right. Since we started the graduate program, we've been very busy trying to make sure that we start from the base with the gender equality. And we moved on from about 30% attractive pool of talent into 50% this year, and we're moving into 60%. So we're moving the equation from more male-dominated graduate program into more female-dominated graduate program. The purpose is not just to focus on this factor, it's just that we increase that pool of talent from women, from female perspective, and make sure that with time, the policies that we are adopting internally within AECOM is to attempt to eliminate any necessary decision-making point, milestone in a female's career where she has to make the choice to leave the business. So that's quite important for us. So with that in mind, I think it's important for all of us to think the same way. That what you've mentioned earlier about a woman having to leave early home to, let's say, sit her family with her kids, with her newborn babies. This is no longer an option for us to react to because that's part of the nature of what we do. And especially, and I always say that to my colleagues, if the construction industry is about men, then we're building cities for men. And that's not how it should be. We should be basically ensuring that the diverse opinion, the diverse sentiments of every gender should be involved in building out those bricks, the cities, the environment and the built environment we live in. But having said that, I mean, the way that we are growing in AECOM and what we're trying to do as well is adopting what we call now the freedom to grow.
Yeah.
It's a policy that is a global policy. We've been putting it together now, and it has to do with basically pushing forward the idea of if you can work from anywhere, and if it works for the project, and if it works for the client, and if it works for you, then it must work for the company.
Yeah.
And in that sense, we are allowing people to take on decision of when to work, how to work, and where to work. And therefore, basically, we eliminate any necessary decision for someone to make to leave the business because of a family reason, or because they have to make a decision to leave with their partner to the kingdom or to leave back to their home country. So we're offering this flexibility, the global mobility, to ensure that people can take those choices and make those choices, informed decisions, and be able to be accommodated within another office within AECOM globally. So quite a lot of the policy starts from going from the graduate program, but ensuring with the same time that no reason for someone to make a call to leave the business just due for the fact that they have a certain family condition that they have to adopt or react to.
Yeah, very intriguing insights there, and I also believe these are great achievements and initiatives that a company like AECOM has adopted, and I think every other organization that is now changing their policies also needs to look at all the positives that are coming out of it, like how you mentioned the cities are not just for men, it's also for women, so let's build it and also involve women when we are building the cities of the future. Now moving on, we've observed that occupational segregation remains a major challenge for women joining the workforce. And it's not just in the construction sector, I believe, it's across several other sectors as well. But when it comes to the construction sector, obviously there has been extreme gender discrimination. So I would like to know from each one of you, how has the industry been discovering and identifying these often overlooked challenges? Let's hear from you first, Olga.
Construction industry, sorry, in the past wasn't very attractive to women. Hard hats and boots on the side, you know, women tried to escape that, but it all changed, I think. And if we reflect back to the point that I was making on innovation and stagnation of innovation, I think we all realized we need more diversity. So, and we can see that our industry is progressing. We are seeing digital innovation, artificial intelligence, all the work was, well, the technical side of this, of innovation. All of this are creating new places and opportunities for different talents to come in. So for women now to join this workforce, it looks a little bit different. It looks intelligent, like it looks like I can do that. So we are working a lot with young girls at school before they even think about the university. We work with a lot of people from underprivileged background. We help them, we support them, and we invest in them to see the benefit of joining this industry. And this is what we need to encourage. But one more point that I would like to mention also here, I think a little bit challenging or challenge this. We need to kind of now move away, and as you can see, so many companies are doing so much on bringing more women. So I would like to move away a little bit from talking about men and women in general, because being in a leadership role myself, I don't want somebody to think that my company promoted me just because I am a woman and because we need to make those numbers. So diversity, they say the numbers, the inclusion, it's the impact. And I want us to focus more on the impact that we are making. So bringing talents, bringing men and women together, working together, collaborating, and making that, you know, change the impact that we all want to make in the world. This is what the most important thing is. And I have seen the change in the construction industry now.
Yeah, very fitting points made there, Olga. And I would like to also hold on to those points because we will be talking about leadership later on in one of the other panels that we have in the day. But also reflecting on that, I think as we always believe, the processes need to be organic, you know. If you hire the person who has the right talent and you are able to lead the role, then you should be the one taking up the role. Moving on to you, Shuruk, how have things been, you know, in the industry when you look at it from a challenge perspective, and what are the kind of challenges that, you know, you've overcome, you know, you meaning Mott MacDonald has overcome over the years?
Thank you. I think the more positive element of this question and such event like today's event is that we are raising awareness. We are discussing this, and by raising awareness, we are actually asking more questions.
Absolutely.
So what are probably the cultural influences that influence young girls when they choose their career or education path? Because that's really important. We need to start at the early stage. What are the informal barriers that are leading to this segregation at the workplace? We do have some alarming indicators, like, for example, the amount or number of women in senior positions decreases, the more the position is, the number is actually lower, and that's really alarming. Another thing which Susanne rightly mentioned is the pay gap. That's a massive alarming message which needs over 136 years, probably you mentioned. That's really scary.
Yeah.
So we need to start by tackling the most obvious things at a very early stage. And I think also when we advertise for jobs, the industry used to be very much targeting men, even without even noticing, subconsciously or unconsciously, we were attracting or inviting men to be part of this industry. I think by advertising at the early stage, using the right language, gender, neutral advertisements, and I think it's really important not to even mention in the job advertisement the number of years, the experience, because that would also limit the talents you are inviting to be on board. Also, a very, very important thing to remember is that how are we talking to women and about women in the industry is very important. Are we showcasing role models? Are we, again, when we, for example, produce a brochure, do we always use an image of a male engineer in the field? Are we moving away from these stereotypes? So unless we tackle these, some of them might be basic, but they are much needed. So we need to challenge these norms, these stereotypes, in order for us to move away from that segregation in this industry, I think.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about this, Jane? Do you also believe in what I and all of us mentioned here about segregation? Do you think that, with better policies in place and by changing the way we are even approaching job advertisements, we can change the factor of segregation in the sector?
Yes, absolutely. I think that Shuruk's absolutely right. She touched on something really important. Although gender diversity is something that we need to address for women, the conversation needs to involve everybody. These flexible policies that are available to women need to be available to men too, and they need to be encouraged to take those policies up. They need to be encouraged to take advantage of a flexible working policy so that, it's not stigmatized that, female colleague, she's disappeared again, she's on flexible hours. If everybody is using these policies to the best of their advantage, it becomes normal. There's no isolation for the female members of the team feeling like they're being given different treatment, or maybe people think that they're not as much of a team player because they are the ones having to take a bit of time out during the day and then get back to work maybe in the evening. So I think it's two things. It's having those policies in place to begin with, but also encouraging everybody to use them and make it, really a non-issue. It's just a standard thing that's available and people take advantage as and when they need to.
Yeah. Now, with this as an ongoing process, like you said, I would like to come to you, Amir, and also understand if you think, are we also solving the right problems and moving towards the right direction? Although we are not there yet, it is a journey in progress, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's happening out there in other regions, not really here specifically. Other regions, we started to see that breakthrough. We started to see much more representation of female on sites. In offices, we see this basically due to policies embedded within, for example, in the UK, Gender pay gap needs to be reported every year. Recruitment and retention practices should be reported. All of this has been regulated. And that's great because then we're starting to see now the results of this. But we're too far in here, let's face it. I mean, we're too far of really having those right policies that allow us to see much more increase in number of female in the businesses, in the senior leadership, but also on site. How many times you apply for, or you put an advertising for a resident engineer and you have a female applying for it?
Yeah.
How many? Why? It's because we started directly by saying that there is experience needed. 20 years experience needed. How many female have 20 years experience in resident engineer? So we do have a problem already in how we apply and how we get the jobs recruited or at least advertised. And from that moment in time, you're already putting a barrier to growth of the female gender within the industry. So we should start getting more different practices applied into that recruitment, having also get in to sit with clients, with business owners, to let them know that the time have changed now. We need to listen to each other, whether you're female or you're male. You have the experience, you have the knowledge, and therefore it is time now to sit down and respect each other's opinion, because that's something also we face. We've seen so many times there's rejection of the fact that there is somebody from another gender sitting in front and being able to somehow push an idea or to pursue an idea. So there is acceptance that needs to also be embedded in the field. We need to accept each other. We need to accept the fact that whether you're female or male, you do have the knowledge. Therefore, you do have the logic to implement any strategy or any answer to any problem. So I believe from that point in time, region-wise here, we do have a lot of work to be done. This is probably putting the first brick in the right direction. We need to start thinking about the recruitment policies, the retention policies, the acceptance of each other's personal issues and how we deal with them in the work field. And also, at the same time, just making sure that we open up the discussion. Let the discussion be always open. And as you've mentioned earlier, that it's not really only about female, but also in the same time being able to accept each other, whether male or female, whether from a different ethnic background. It's all about cultural understanding and cultural acceptance.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also think it boils down to the point about changing mindsets as well in the construction sector. You know, if you are not changing your mindsets and outlook towards how your policies should be, then you should start doing it now. Otherwise, you know, that imbalance and proportional imbalance, I would say, will still continue to be there, which we don't want.
We're probably far less than 99%, more than 99% male on sites. I mean, there's barely, you see one woman sitting on a site in an office. And that is already an indicator that how far are we in addressing the problem. In the office, yes, we believe that we are 20%, 25%, but that should increase to a certain level. But I agree with you, it shouldn't be always about, you know, just promoting people just because they are genderly diverse. It's not about that. It goes without saying. We need to be giving the merit to the people, to the right people, but at the same time making sure that we don't have the unconscious bias embedded in our thinking because we come from a male industry. That's how things are at the moment.
In fact, even as the editor and as a journalist, whenever I go for site visits to construction sites, I have never met a project manager who is not male, you know, who's approached me and is taking me around the site. So I sincerely hope that next year and probably years to go, whenever I go for site visits, I'm able to, you know, look at the project management. Oh, she is the one who'll be taking me around, and I want that to be organic if I'm in the authority position to say that. I know we are a little conscious of time here, so we will like to wrap our discussion here today, but then we would like to continue our conversation by answering the questions that our audiences have today. So let's take our first question. Are women in your organizations being paid the same as men in similar roles, or is hiring women helping your bottom line by paying them less? And I think that reflects on what Shuruk mentioned here. I would like Olga for us to answer this question.
We, as I mentioned, we are working on a lot of different policies and working on understanding where we are as a company. And we have examined our gender pay gap, and we published this on our website, the report. Yes, it did exist, but yes, we are working every year, year on year, to improve this. This year it's been reported as the lowest, and we always benchmark ourselves to others in the industry, to other industries. It still exists, but I think companies like ours and a lot of others, and especially Drive from United Nations on ESG initiative, helping our societies to develop a future and sustainable future for all, we are changing this.
Yeah. And is this the same case with AECOM as well, Amir? Like, how are the policies being changed there when it comes to, the pay gap that women usually face? And I know it's been quite staggering when it comes to the percentages and numbers.
Yeah, that's true. I think we're trying with the latest changes in policies, or even with adopting somehow some transparency in that area, we're seeing reduction, quite significant reduction in that gender pay gap.
Yeah.
That transparency is needed. We need to be able to evaluate the performance of our policies internally through that transparency. And globally speaking, as AECOM, this is one of the key issues that we are trying to address, in addition to the inclusive and equal approach to recruitment and retention. But gender pay gap is something that we are addressing very, very significantly. And that's just, honestly speaking, this is something that once from day one when we walked in, gender pay gap is not only the pay gap available, it's cultural pay gap, it's about different pay gaps. And these are the ones that we are trying now to put together solutions for. I've seen this probably not within the company that I work with now before, that even background pay gaps, where you come from is a pay gap, which university you graduated from is a pay gap. All of the pay gaps, stigmatization of people, stereotyping people, this has all resulted in problems, and we are now addressing these problems as we go. We're far from being on the right track, but we're doing what we can to ensure that we don't actually have those behaviors adopted by anyone, from the individuals, from the senior leadership down to the lower level.
Yeah, and I think if you're not doing it already, we should start having a blank canvas and start writing about what we want to change in our policies and solve that issue right there, like both of you mentioned. Now, going on to our next question, are you seeing women exit the workforce, and what causes this, and what are the companies doing in terms of re-strategizing their policies to change this? I would like for Shuruk to answer this question, as well as Jane later on.
Thank you. So definitely, we've been talking about how difficult it is to retain women in the workplace or at the workplace. I think policies being flexible is definitely one of them. I think having a clear criteria when it comes to career progression. So is it based on performance? How can women actually progress in their career? Because if they enter knowing that they're going to hit that glass ceiling, that's probably a reason for them to leave. But if they know that they have a clear path where they can actually demonstrate their skills and grow and become really what they were hoping to become, that's definitely an element to return women. Having that life-work balance that we talked about is definitely safe environment. Also having, the mentorship opportunities, training opportunities, because I do feel that sometimes women do miss out on training, just because we feel sometimes, unfortunately, we still feel that we need to work extra to prove ourselves. If women go on maternity leave, they feel they're missing a lot. They need to compensate that by working harder. So the time for training and personal development on all aspects is really limited. So that's something I think we can invest in to return and attract more women. And back to my previous point, because I'm comms, I really like to talk about comms, is how we talk about women and how we address women in the workplace is really crucial. It's really important. Women in the industry should not always be talked to as a second-class citizen. We are in the industry, we are partners, and we need to be addressed as equal partners in the industry, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. We are all equal partners in the industry. And reflecting on what you said, I think let's continue with you also, Jane, to understand, are we strategizing better, reflecting on the same question, and do we have the right policies in place, to strategize better, as I said?
Well, certainly from Reedsmith's point of view, I think that we are heading in the right direction. Just to pick up on what Shuruk was saying, we've got, as part of our diversity sort of broader program, we kind of focus on training, mentoring and sponsorship to provide that kind of support to people so that they don't feel the need to necessarily leave and they feel like they can't be accommodated and do their job in the way that they would like to do, which kind of also links into, the agile working and the flexible hours and having the IT infrastructure in place to allow our lawyers and support staff to be able to do the job in a way that allows them to do it to the best of their ability. So I think that, no one has the right answer, but we are all working towards, in our respective fields, whether it's in the construction industry or the legal industry, we all recognise that these are issues, and we are all working towards improving and kind of trying to find the optimum work environment, I guess, for people to thrive in.
Yeah, that's right. And I know we are running short of time, so I would like to wrap the discussion and know from each one of you on your final comments on our discussions today. I know we are not there yet, we discussed about it, but are we filling the gaps right? Are we adopting the right initiatives to fill those gaps? Let's start with you first, Amir.
I think we are on the track. We've just started. I believe there's a long way. We started to make noise, and it's very important to make the noise, the right noise in that direction, ensuring that we have the right, kind of time spent investigating our performance already and thinking about how can we build up a future full of talent that is full of gender diverse, but also ethnically diverse backgrounds, but also learning and teaching others to accept that diversity and accept the differences in between. I mean, this place is one of the most diverse places in the whole world, probably. We work in an environment where we have 195 nationalities sitting in one area. In our office, we do have, I would reflect on my team, we are basically 18 nationalities in 90 staff. We're diverse. We have about 45% of our pool of talent is female. The reason for this is because we offer all of that flexibility we talked about, and we have found that people are staying within our team just because of the fact we're not pushing them out. Yeah. So what I want to say is at the end of the day, there are 10 steps that we probably need to take ourselves. In addition to that, we need to also have our female colleagues, our peers, to take one step in that direction as well. Yeah. So as much as we have those steps to take, we also feel that also there's a need from the people themselves to take that one step forward. And that step is about not putting themselves in that area, making themselves feel as if they are targeted. Just get on with it, move on with it, and push hard, you'll get it, and you get the job, and you grow within the business. The moment we feel that aura around us that we have been, stigmatized or moved away, the moment we feel ourselves victimized and we push ourselves outside. So it's also about us, it's our psychological state of mind, it's about how we want this job.
Yeah, very significant points made there. Jane, what are your final thoughts about our discussion today? And do you also think we are filling the gaps?
I think that we are definitely filling the gaps, certainly from the conversation that we've had this morning and some of the really interesting things that my colleagues on the panel have had to say. From my perspective, I think one of the key things that has been picked up at this morning is that, it starts at a young age. We need to, and as some of the companies here are saying, they're engaging with children at school age, and I think that that's really important. I've got a 6-year-old boy at home, and I think it's really important to create a sense of, we shouldn't really be having these conversations by the time the younger generation are at this stage, because it should be normal to see a girl on site in in a hard hat being an engineer. One of my favourite stories to read with him is called Rosa Revere Engineer, and it's all about a little girl who tries and fails lots of times, eventually finds the solution. But I love the fact that there's a girl at the heart of the story, and it's the girl that's the engineer and not a little boy. To him it's perfectly normal, and I think that that's where we start.
That's absolutely right. Coming to you, Shuruk, what are your final thoughts?
So I think we don't claim to know all the answers, and I'm going to quote our chairman here. He says, it's okay not to know everything, but it's not okay to ignore that lack of knowledge or that ignorance. So we are finding our way. We are trying to come up with solutions, definitely for the next generation. I think one thing I would really stress on is that we need to have EDI competences embedded. So whenever we have, we're thinking of leaders and of people who are responsible for setting up or setting the policies up, I think every single person should be EDI driven, should have certain competencies that we actually measure people against, because unless everyone is aligned, the change is going to be very slow.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and we don't want that. We want the change to be a fast-paced. What are your final thoughts, Olga?
I think we cannot change things overnight, but if we work really hard and if we try to look at our own unconscious bias, if we try to encourage others to be more inclusive to our environment, if we create those role models for young girls, for young talents, for young people to look at our industry and say, I want to be there because I want to change or influence the world, how it's built. We will be influencing and making huge change, right, in our diversity and inclusion. So my point today is let's be more inclusive and focus not only gender diversity, cultural diversity, but focus on purely on talent and what each of us can bring together today to innovate for our future. So the more we talk, the more we collaborate, the better we do for our future.
Yeah, and it boils down finally to having equity and equal opportunities across the sector, you know, keeping away the gender bias all through. Well, that was a very interesting and insightful panel discussion. All of you, thank you so much once again for joining us today. Please give a huge round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you just hold on for the group photo, please? Now, I hope that the final panel discussion has cleared any questions that you may have had about realigning your workplace policies and how it will, I believe, not only increase the representation of women, but will equally increase productivity and profitability across organizations. And I believe that is what we as the construction sector and several other sectors should be aiming for. Thank you once again, everyone. Please, a huge round of applause for our panelists. Yes, please. Yeah.
But when you look at contracting side of things, I wonder sometimes if it ever be possible at all to reach parity in terms of gender there. It's just the nature of construction industry itself. You know, of course, it's hard to see how, as Ahmad said, we'll ever reach 50% of women actually be on site.
Yeah. I mean, if I may, I think that's why we are all here together, you know, to answer those questions and have a conversation to understand where is it that we are lacking and where is it that, you know, we should be placing the right policies. And I think each one of the panelists clearly said that, you know, what their companies are doing. And if there are other stakeholders in the contracting sector who are not doing this, then I think it is time for them to step up, you know, and start realigning their policies. So I believe I've just answered that for you. Yes. Now, moving on to our second panel discussion of the day, I would like to invite Disha Dadlani to the stage to take the conversation ahead with you, and she will be talking about attracting more young women and engineers and architects into the workplace. The stage is all yours, Disha.
Thank you for the introduction, Ranju. And can I just take a minute to just appreciate the energy here in this room? I mean, it's only Tuesday, but it's easily going to be the highlight of my week. Now, I think that was a very insightful session. All of our panelists spoke about the need for diversity, and I know that one of our panelists said something very interesting about diversity being the need now, and there are no two ways about it, and that's why we are here today. Now, our first panel of the day, of course, focused on the region's workplace policies. Taking this conversation further, we will now be discussing the need to attract more young engineers and architects into the workplace. The region, of course, has made notable movements in this regard in creating a positive career path for women. But how much progress have we made so far? And now, for the million-dirham question. Are we there yet? Well, let's find out in today's panel, and allow me to invite our panelists on stage. Please welcome them with a round of applause. Let's begin with Swathi Rokhari. She's from Gaj, Godwin Austin Johnson, associate at Gaj, and Swathi, of course, is highly respected within the team at Gaj as a capable pair of hands, particularly on site, where she leads large multinational teams on diverse projects. Thanks for joining us today, Swathi. Let's now call on stage Neem Bhakri, who is Assistant Manager, Operations, Alpine Limited. Tasneem is an operations coordinator and a well-accredited professional with an architectural background and an engineering background, with aspirations of becoming a leading voice in the local and international green building community. Thanks for joining us on stage, Tasneem. And our final panelist for today's session is Marwa Ahmad, Senior Project Manager at Kraknel. Thanks for joining us on stage, Marwa. Now, to give you a bit of an introduction, Marwa recently shifted her project management skills from contracting to consultancy and currently specializes in the urban planning and landscape realm at Kraknel. Well, thanks for joining us, Marwa, and a big thank you to all of our panelists. So quite excited to start this panel, about just young architects and engineers in the workplace. So thanks very much again, ladies. This is a very exciting start to this panel. Let's start it, of course, with a positive note. And let's put forth the all-important question. But before that, I'm going to talk about, yes, we are seeing change, and I'm sure that all of you would agree with me. There is a positive shift. There is definitely a mindset shift. But having said that, is there scope for improvement? And I want to understand from each of you, just how do you think the region fares in ensuring a diverse and young pool of talent across engineering and architectural roles? I want to start with you, Swathi.
Thank you, Disha. Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. So, coming back to your question, how does this region fare? I think it's making good progress. There's a good trend. We are seeing more and more females. And if you look around this room as well, all are construction females. These are construction professionals. So it's a good trend. It's a good change. Secondly, I entered the Middle East construction industry around like 15 years back. And there definitely has been a lot of change in terms of the policies, environment, safety, everything. I actually came from a contracting background, and then I moved to consultancy. So I've seen the change out there, and this region more so ever. We have a lot of construction going on in this region. Add to that, we have more than 200 nationalities out here with their own culture, with their own mindsets. Giving all these factors in consideration, I think there's a good evolution that is happening. We have started the process, people are talking. I was quite impressed with the previous panel, the way they spoke. It's really interesting and good to know that we are on the good path. So yes, there is a good change that is happening in the region, but it can definitely be better.
Can it be better, Tasneem? And what are your thoughts on this? Do you agree as well with Swathi?
Yes, definitely I agree that it's a nice thing that we're having these conversations. But of course, taking that to results and actions is always a journey. We are at the beginning of that journey, in my opinion. Many companies are doing great efforts into achieving the results, but still I would stay looking at it from a long-term perspective. We are still in the beginning period of change. Now, the idea here is translating that into actions and results. So this is where it sets organizations apart. The organizations that are still having that conversation and the organizations that have actually transferred that into actual results and actions.
Right. So the key word here, of course, is change. And I'd like to now come to you, Marwa. Do you want to weigh in on this as well?
Yes, thank you, Disha. First of all, I just want to say, if for those who've never seen a female project manager, hi. And second of all, yes, I mean, I've studied in the UAE, and what inspired me to study architectural engineering was actually, a small sketch done by my cousin when I was 6 years old, and it just stuck in my head, and I wanted to pursue that. But I would also like to say that there was no companies when I was in school, and there was no encouragement to get into architecture. And I was a bit scared because I was not very good in sketching. And I didn't know that AutoCAD existed. I didn't know that, things have been digitized. But now, and I have friends who work in they're teachers, people from Kraknel, or people from the old companies that I used to work with, approach universities, approach schools. I think that's a significant change. I think that's a huge paradigm shift in how, when I was, younger, and had to go through the journey by my own, and now there's people who are more informed about what is architecture, what is engineering, what is, how can you inspire these young girls and young people and young men as well into entering this workforce. So I do think there's a huge step forward, let's say, in how things have changed in the UAE. Yeah.
Right. Great. You all packed quite a positive sentiment, but I'm sure with that you would also agree with me that while there has been change, we still do have some work to do and some progress to make. Now let's get into the specifics. I understand that all of you, if not most of you, are often on site. I know, Swathi, you mentioned that you were on site earlier today before joining us at the conference. So I want to understand just how inclusive have on-site roles and functions become. Roles such as site supervisors, inspectors, crane operators, and engineers, these are all inarguably very gender specific in nature. Do you guys see that changing at all? And if not, what are the internalized biases that are standing in our way as an industry? Maybe again, we'll start with you, Swathi.
I think you have said the word internalized bias. There's a lot of bias that we ourselves hold, conscious and a subconscious bias. It's there in our mindsets. There's a cultural mindset which allows us to think, oh no, this role is for a man, this role is for a woman. This role requires more physical strength. So, maybe a man should be doing it. This has to be built, a man should be building. So this has been ingrained a lot in the society. Mm-hmm. Now, however, things have definitely changed. We are moving aside, we are moving far from that now. I've been on site. What you have said is factual. Crane operator or a site supervisor or, construction manager, mostly you see males. Mm-hmm. I have to yet see a construction manager, and good to see you as a project manager, basically. So, yes, we have to rise above these mindsets. I don't personally think a role has to be gender specific. It has to be more ability specific. If you can deliver, if you can do the job, then yes, go for it. If a girl wants to be a crane operator, yes, definitely. But there has to be work towards, achieving this kind of, eventuality. Yes, we need to make it more normal. Females should also be encouraged. There should be, more mentoring, introduction, exposure to the construction field at a school level, education level. Everything should, start from that point and then move on. Right. So, yes, roles in the construction industry need not be gender specific, but they currently are in many places, and we just need to, improve on that. We have taken steps to move forward in that direction. It's a long way to go, but we are on that path.
Right, it is definitely a long way to go, but we're probably making progress, and that's why we're all here today. Tasneem, do you want to add in on here as well?
Yes, I'd like to add to that great point that actually, sometimes on site, we've seen some incidents where this subconscious bias has actually affected some of the work that our consultants and our engineers are doing. This is something that's being observed throughout the industry. So it's a stated fact, and it's almost, sometimes I feel like when we are addressing it, this is the start of the change. But again, as I mentioned, when an organization takes that conscious decision that even though in some cases if it would, for example, hurt a relationship with a client, for example, an organization has to understand that prioritizing the well-being of engineers and consultants in the workplace and specifically on site as well, in case these incidents of subconscious bias have arisen, is important. And this is sometimes in the form of whether it's on the gender topic, when it's, for example, a female who's on site, and if she experiences any type of bias, harassment, any type of discrimination that is on site, it is really important for the organization to actually take a step forward in correcting that and looking into the corrective action. So it's really important to stay in touch with the engineers that are on site, to closely coordinate, and even if it's not just on site, to make sure that the organization in general, in terms of the internal processes, it's not always on site. It could be in a meeting, in a client meeting, in an internal meeting, where people would basically experience this discrimination. So being really careful in that topic is really important. And it's also important to basically make that a known fact, whether for females or young engineers, young architects, that this is how the organization is looking at it. This is the culture of the organization. This is what we want to put forward. So whether it's your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your race, is not a determinant fact into how you will be advancing in the organization, and that it's purely based on merit and talent.
Right. And we will be discussing in just a few minutes what your respective companies are doing in this regard and what the industry should be doing as well. Marwa, I want to come to you now. It's interesting that you introduced yourself as a female project manager, just because that is so rare and this needs to be normalized. And again, that's why we are here. So I want to hear your views as well. Do you think roles such as yours are gender specific in nature, and how can we as an industry change that?
So I do think definitely currently it is male dominated, but I think I just want to touch base before speaking about whether it's gender bias or not, is how we describe these environments. It's a tough environment. That's why women should not be in these kind of tough environments. And my question is, why are we working in tough environments? I mean, whether it's a male or a female, why are we not evolving our environment so that it's a good environment for everyone to work in, whether it's a male or a female? And I think that could be the root cause of why you don't find, operators who are female, or why you're finding very few women as project managers. Now, what I found on a personal experience on site is that being a female in a male-dominated environment actually helps the environment. It softens conversations. It makes the meetings, there's less swear words, less fights. There is a level of respect that everyone has to elevate to, just because of the difference. And I think we should celebrate our differences as men and women, and that's part of the diversity. That's part of bringing something different and new to the table, and making it innovative, within that tough environment, and changing that tough environment into an environment that's suitable for everyone to work in. And I think that's important in these kind of workplaces.
Right, 100%. And I quite agree with what you said about, changing what we perceive to be a tough environment. Now we've discussed the challenges, to creating a more gender-sensitive environment. Let's now talk about the collective responsibility here. Now, since we're talking about younger roles and the need for more young architects and engineers, I want to understand from each of you just what is the onus on education institutions and authorities to fuel a greater intake of female candidates across such roles. Let's start with you, Swathi.
I think education plays a very important role in shaping a society, and introductions to different kind of professions, fields of engineering, construction, and others as well. It should start at a very basic level, when children are learning lessons, taking up courses, deciding what course they wish to take to. So education in the universities play a very important role, and we need to, start at those basics, basically. Whether it's, like I mentioned earlier, there has to be more exposure. Earlier schooling was not co-ed. In many countries, we had different, like girls would go to a separate school, boys would go to a separate school. Now co-ed schools have become more of a reality and a new normal, which is good. So aside from that, introduction and exposure to the construction background, specifically since we are talking about construction, should be there right at the university level and the school level both. That's what I feel.
Right. Tasneem, how about you?
Yes, I believe that exposure, as you mentioned, is really important, and making it as early as possible is really important. So, for example, when an organization participates in events that have students, and at Alpine, we have strategic partnerships with educational institutions where we increase the direct contact and collaborations from our consultants and engineers with the students. So we have a partnership as well with Heriot-Watt University, where we participated just last week in a career fair. So actually that opened my eyes in terms of how much it's important to actually speak to students about what the organization is doing, because sometimes the misconceptions and the stereotypes and all of that is actually introduced to them early on, whether through technology, social media, society. These misconceptions can actually direct their career path. So if we do not reach out, I believe it's fairly irrational that we sit back in the organization and say, I wonder why young engineers are not coming, or I wonder why they're not being attracted to the industry in general. So having that conversation, raising awareness is really important. Speaking to them at the level of what they are learning right now in their curriculums. So not necessarily making the industry or what we do sound as daunting or as intimidating as it may sound. So I believe this is really important. So just the direct contact with students early on, showing them the initiatives and the actions of the organization is really also essential, because the generations are increasingly being more aware, let's say. They're much more intelligent than previous decades, whether that because the availability of the information, technology, the internet. People are actually holding organizations accountable for the initiatives that they say they have. So it's really important to show that to young engineers and architects that this is what we're doing in the organization, this is what we offer, this is the initiative that we have, and then to let them basically create that conscious decision to join the industry.
Right, be the change you seek, I guess. Marwa, how is this shaping up at Kraknel, and in your capacity, are you also reaching out to education institutions and authorities?
Yeah, so Kraknel does reach out to different universities, and recently are also looking to reach out for schools. So we do have some of our associates and some of our directors who lecture there or approach people there. But I think communication is important, and that what Kraknel does well. But also investment, which is it's a time investment, it's money investment towards a goal, which is to attract young engineers and architects into the business. And And it's not enough to just communicate with them. You have to create opportunities. And I think Kraknel has done that well by actually hiring, not just speaking and talking and communicating, but also creating that opportunity, and not just because, you know, it's something to tick the box with, but because they actually see the value in attracting younger architects and engineers into the company, and with no bias, whether it's a male or a female, equal opportunities are being presented. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, and we will be discussing the tick box exercise in an upcoming panel. But I think you've shared some very positive insights, Marwa. Now, again, I want to, just still continue our discussion about company objectives and just company behavior in this regard. At your respective companies, what kind of steps do you see, each of your companies taking to drive inclusion, drive change through policy and behavior? And do you have any programs set up for this? Swathi, I want to understand about how this is shaping up at GAJ.
Okay, so GAJ has been always a very inclusive environment. I'm actually happy to say that I haven't faced any kind of disparity between the genders out there. It's more merit-based. It's always been open to inclusive, an inclusive environment with diverse cultures, and the roles didn't matter. If the male or female factor didn't matter considering the role. So yes, the environment is good in terms of fostering an inclusive workspace. We have been open to, when allowing flexible hours when, anyone needs it, whether it's a male or a female, whether it's a maternity leave, extending a maternity leave or going home early to, address other things. So while we have certain policies in place which allow the employee, whether it's a male or a female, to, have a more flexible environment so that the productivity is increased. It also fosters, various cultures, whatever ethnicity, the background, it doesn't matter in GAJ. So we do have good policies in place at GAJ.
Right, and I'm also quite interested in understanding the kind of programs you have set up at Alpine, Tasneem, and maybe do you have anything that specifically caters to the younger pool of talent?
Yes, so at Alpine we have many initiatives, one of which is the Alpine Inclusion and Diversity Initiative. This is an initiative that focuses on these aspects of creating that equal environment. So, for example, one of the results of that is that the Alpine management has decided to double the maternity leave, the paid maternity leave for female employees, which was a huge step into showing that commitment in inclusion and diversity. Another item in terms of the initiatives is that we have multiple initiatives that focus on the employee well-being. So we have the Alpine Healthy Initiative. We focus there on creating that wellness environment, being pioneers also of the well-building standard. We also focus on creating that environment. Now that's whether through mental health initiatives, actual physical health activities and initiatives. And this is also, we have found that this actually affects our attraction and retention of talent. Because it's really important when someone is judging the organization that they will be joining, that they see all these initiatives and results that are happening. And then when they join, it's also important that we foster that environment of coaching and mentoring young engineers. So we also have the buddy program where a new joiner would have a mentor who's more experienced that would be able to take them step by step towards the learning program that we have set. Now, this is also important that it's a structured learning program for them in the beginning specifically, that they can actually follow and they would see clear milestones in their career. Now, this also has affected me personally because it was important for me to see previously in organizations that there's a clear ladder, there are milestones that you can look forward to. You know what are the basically the determinants of getting promoted, for example, reaching higher levels. So this is always a given fact that this is a huge determinant into whether you're attracting young engineers or not. So fostering that environment, that coaching environment, and that clear pathway of learning as well is really important.
Right. Marwa, do you also want to share about how, what kind of programs you have set up at Kraknel?
So I think in Kraknel, we are at the beginning of the journey of expanding and evolving in that aspect. But away from policies, the fact that there are a lot of young landscape female architects that, currently in Kraknel, who are being empowered, who are being mentored, and who can see a good career path, and they know that there's nothing to stop them from progressing. I think that's what Kraknel is doing, and it's very important. Just having that environment where there's no bias, there's no major gap when it comes to pay, when it comes to treatment, when it comes to position, and just having that set in place and as the baseline of the DNA of Kraknel helps a lot of young female engineers join Kraknel, because if you're comfortable in the environment, regardless of policies, because you can have all the policies in the world and you can tick all the boxes, but if you're not comfortable within that environment and you cannot actually see the effect and feel the effect, then there's no point. It's just going to be policies in books, and yes, we have a female director, and yes, we have we have 25% of so and so. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've joined Kraknel, is that I actually had spoken to the employees before joining and spoken to a lot of people just to understand the environment, because there's a lot of big companies that they'll advertise all sorts of things, but if you do not manage to give that sense of understanding for these young female architects and engineers, then there's no point of all these efforts, because in the end you do want to make sure that they are within that comfortable environment to grow and expand, not just, as I say, not just for the female, also for the male young engineers, and create that environment, and they'll come.
Right. Very interesting. Now, before we wrap up and have you answer our audience Q&A, I'd like to understand from each of you again, just how can our industry collectively promote the training and the professional development for women across engineering and architecture, and in alignment with the UN Women's Empowerment Principles? Let's begin with you, Swathi.
Could you just repeat the question?
Sure. So how do you think our industry can collectively promote training as well as professional development for women across engineering and architectural roles?
Okay. So yes, both of my colleagues have also mentioned wonderful things about the initiatives and programs which their companies do, which I think is, GAJ also does a similar kind of programs. So this is a good step forward. Secondly, having more and more panels where we encourage a dialogue like this. Now, we are doing this for female professionals, but maybe if we start introducing such panels for women at a junior level, so that would also help, having more awareness created at an early age. So that definitely is a way forward on this. And secondly, yes, it's as a society, we all need to work together. We have we have marginalized certain roles for what I mean to say is that males had certain roles specifically and female had certain roles specifically. We all are now working together to, to change this basically. So it has to be a joint effort and at every level. And it's important to start it right early at a junior level, schools, universities, encouraging more and more such panel discussions, which will definitely help take things forward.
Great. Now, I'm going to underline again the UN Women's Empowerment Principles. Just with that in mind, I'll come to you now, Tasneem. How do you think the industry should be working forward and should be, sort of paving the way forward to ensure diversity and to ensure that women across engineering and across architectural positions are promoted in terms of training and professional development?
I believe the topic of training in specific, it's really important that the company, first of all, sets aside a budget because let's face it, most of the time, the obstacle when you are looking into having someone trained in a certain topic, the obstacle sometimes into making that equal and open for junior employees as well is always the budget aspect. So I believe it's really important that you have that in mind, that this is an investment that you are making and making that conscious decision to take the initiative and take that investment in junior talent to basically get them that opportunity to be promoted through the proper training and development, because sometimes it is important that, especially in specialist topics, that you actually conduct a training and get someone enrolled. Another thing that's really nice, this is a program that we have at Alpine, and we have tried it so far for 1 year. But it has already shown some results, which is the continuing education program. This is a program where all employees have to report scores in terms of what they have done throughout the year, whether that's articles, training, participation in events. All of that is actually participating in their personal and career development. So we have several categories in which they can report these scores, and this has created a nice environment where everyone is trying to achieve these scores, and it created a nice sense of competitiveness in terms of learning and development as well. So it has helped us in keeping and maintaining that growth mindset with all employees. So I think programs similar to this, setting aside a budget, having the decision makers in the company and the senior leadership really involved in that investment that you make when you are training young employees is really important as well.
Right. Now, Marwa, I want to come to you and ask you, just what are your thoughts on this? How important is it to train and professionally develop women across these roles?
Yeah, I think it's vital to start the training, especially if you're having young engineers joining, a company. It's important to draw some sort of path for these young engineers, and you need training to do that. But I think the conversations should start with what does the company need and what does the young engineer need, and based on that, the programs for training needs to be set to help, the development of the company and the development of the careers of these young engineers, because. In the previous panel, they were speaking about how is it difficult, how hard it is to retain, the female engineers and architects in a company. And I think part of it is that they can't see the end goal. But if you draw that map for them, and if you help them, navigate that map and reach that goal, then I'm sure that these young engineers or even mid-level, architects and engineers would love to continue working within the same company because they can see their progress and they can see where they can reach. And of course, training is a huge part of it, training and mentorship. And there's different types of trainings that we need to look at. It's not just presentations, And nowadays, the younger generation and the young architects and engineers, they look to play while they work. And I think we need to adopt these different, styles and different, ways of presenting things and working with things, and stop making them very rigid as they are right now, and try and change the way we do things so that it can attract the minds of the younger generation as well.
Right, so here's hoping, younger architects and engineers are able to view the end goal very soon. I think with the kind of positive strides that we are making as an industry together, that's not too far away, and we are making some progress with some more to make. So thank you very much, ladies. It was lovely having you on our panel. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the panel today, but I'm more than happy to have you answer our audience Q&A, which I see have been pouring in. So let's start with the first one. There is, of course, and I think you'd all agree with me, a glamorization of sorts of the architecture and the interior design industry. Now, we need to make young prospective employees understand the construction sector better. What has your experience been? Whoever wants to take this one.
Can you just repeat it again?
Sure. So there has been a glamorization of sorts of the architecture industry and the interior design industry. How do we sort of give a clear picture to the younger prospective employees that want to enter the industry?
If I can answer it, I think by telling better stories. I think we always tell the great story of, let's say, Burj Khalifa, it's the architectural aspect of it. But we don't say the good story about how it was constructed, and how does the water go all the way up, and all the other aspects of that beautiful piece. And I think if we tell better stories about construction, the way we're talking about architecture and interior design, I'm sure a lot of the younger generation would want to become part of that as well.
Right. I think I caught you nodding in agreement, Swathi. Do you have something to add in here as well?
Yes, I definitely agree with what she's just mentioned, that if, yes, you talk about big projects, it's the design aspect that catches, the fascination. You have the Louvre, you have the Burj Khalifa, you have the Burj Al Arab. There's a bit of glamour out there in the design itself. But if there's more awareness, if there's more content, information, how the construction process has been, it would definitely create more awareness. Even in the print media as well, we like to touch, gloss on the, fancy factors. But there's a background there, and that's a more, genuine, sincere background, hardworking background out there. I have worked alongside blue-collar laborers. I know their story. It's pretty hardworking out there. And it's good for students and young professionals to understand the depths of construction. So yes, we need more awareness of this, and if more people talk about it, that's a way forward in creating this.
100%. Tasneem, do you want to add in here also?
I completely agree as well, and the idea of storytelling in terms of construction is really nice. Basically, if you have young engineers who are still creating their perceptions of the construction industry, if they get stories of, for example, a day at the site, what was the challenge and how was it solved, they would get to see that these tough environments that are being called tough, it's not necessarily always the case, and it's something that they can do. And if they can relate to that in some sense, then of course we would get rid of these stereotypes about the industry.
Right, all very valid points. Now, moving on to the next question that's come in. Compared to the technology industry, construction, of course, is seen as quite traditional in nature. And very rigid as well. Now, how can we change that perception amongst students and emerging engineers? Whoever wants to take this one.
Okay. Yes, construction is still seen as very traditional and rigid, because the main thing is we do have very traditional ways of constructing things. There have been innovations in many other fields, and construction is also having its own innovations. We see more engineering marvels, we see different materials coming up for construction and all that. Yes, the way to change that perception is to definitely innovate and again bring about stories about how engineering marvels have been achieved in this industry. Basically, we think of construction as brickwork, masonry. And it's more than that, actually. The way to create awareness about this is talking about this in media, creating a dialogue, so that students understand that, yes, there's more to construction than just laying bricks.
Right, that's quite interesting as well. Now, Marwa, I see you also want to add in
Yeah,
here.
I would just like to add to that. I think we need to play more in construction. Really need to try and just soften this rigidness that is, and that stigma of it has to be like that. It has to be very serious, and it has to be. It is a serious field. It is a serious subject, but I do think we need to play much more. And I've seen it. I've seen some of that being adopted in some companies, especially when it comes to health and safety, because they realized very quickly putting policies in does not protect people. Changing and having that mental paradigm shift protects people. And through play and through emotional intelligence and through approaching people from the human side of them and not just, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, here's the paper, fill it up, changes environments and change that and made people more safe and ensured that the health and safety of people on site is better. And I think this could be used and scaled, in different areas as well. It is a meeting, it is serious, but play a bit more, and that will create innovation, and that will create better environments, and that will just help shift that rigidness in construction.
Right. Now, moving to the next question that's come in the effort to bring women into the industry, more women into the industry, does a better qualified male run the risk of losing out against a woman for a role in order to just satisfy numbers or fill percentages? Do you want to take this, Tasneem? You've been quiet for a while.
Yes, I believe this question is really critical because it addresses the generalization that happens when we speak about inclusion and diversity. And sometimes if you're talking about including women, the disadvantage here and the lower side, and where many organizations lose the case or many groups of women lose their case, is when it turns into generalizations about men, or it disqualifies men without looking at their merit to satisfy numbers. And this is exactly why when it becomes a question of inclusion and diversity in general, we solve that problem. We are talking about advancing people based on merit, based on talent. We are not speaking about giving more numbers to women, even if they are not, they don't have the capabilities of a certain position. So no one is claiming that, and I believe no woman is actually using that as a card, as opposed to what the question implies. So disqualifying men from positions is not the way forward, and it's not happening. The idea is that if we focus the efforts on advancing based on merit and talent, we would solve the issue of juniors, young engineers that are not advancing, and we would solve the issue of inclusion and diversity in terms of gender and any other aspect. And this has personally affected me as well, because the leadership position that I hold in Alpine, you would say that relatively I'm on the younger side in terms of the position I hold, but because the merit and the talent was the pure determinant for that, it was an opportunity. And so does that disqualify men from the position? No, it is still a question of merit, and it is still a question of talent.
Right. I'll have you hold on to that thought, and I'd actually like for you to stick around for the next 2 sessions, because we'll be exploring this a lot more in detail. Now, to wrap up our audience Q&A, I have an interesting one for whoever wants to take this. When you are training these young engineers, do you have a budget to have paid internships so that you can get motivated young professionals? And I think this sets the tone of the sort of climax of our panel. So whoever wants to take this one. Would you like for me to repeat the question? Sure. So, say when you are training younger engineers, do you have a budget set in place at your respective companies to say have paid internships, and do you see that motivating younger professionals?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as I said previously, it's an investment, and investment includes time and money and other aspects. So if you're not ready to make that investment, then you're not ready to progress. And I think well, Kraknel has a budget and uses that budget every year to not just for training, not just for internships, but for permanently hiring, young female and male engineers as well, so, and architects. So yeah.
Right. Tasneem and Swathi, any thoughts on this?
Yes, thing is, well, to be honest, there's no specific budget as such, but yeah, we do have a lot of interns who come, and the idea is training and getting them to work alongside us, which I think helps them because they finally end up joining the firm because they enjoy the process so much. So no, there's currently no budget as such, but yes, internships are a part and parcel of CAJ culture.
Wonderful. That's very positive. Tasneem?
I believe the budget, and I actually touched on that on the question of learning and development for juniors. The budget is sometimes an obstacle because if you are not setting it aside specifically for that reason, specifically for making an investment on juniors, then it will never happen. So setting that budget aside and holding the organization accountable as juniors as well into your learning and development is really important. And sometimes the budget is not only as a direct expense that goes to, for example, a training. It is also the investment in time from other employees, which also translates into a budget. So the investment of time in terms of mentoring and coaching juniors who have joined the company is also important. So if you're open to the idea of people setting aside a couple of hours just to talk to a junior and tell them about how things are being done, this is basically part of setting aside that budget.
Right, great. Thank you so much, ladies, once again. It was lovely having you join us for our panel discussion. I could go on, but unfortunately, this is all the time we have. You've all painted quite a picture, and I think the future is bright for the younger talent in this region, as long as we're all working towards it. So once again, thank you for joining me today. Can we have you stand for a group picture?
Thank you, Disha, for such an exciting conversation, I would say. And thank you once again, Swathi, Tasneem, and Marwa, for joining us. Now, this panel reminds me of a comment from a senior engineering consultant who once told me that the future generation of architects and engineers will develop new innovations and breakthroughs in the sector, and it is about time that we pass on the torch. With such innovative thoughts in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short refreshment and networking break, and we will see you again in some time. So please enjoy your coffee and conversations. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your coffee and conversations, and I believe you have. I can see that. But earlier today, we heard from experts from the industry about why we need to realign the region's workplace policies to be gender equal, and also how companies must create a positive path for women who are entering the sector. Now, we will shift our attention to leadership roles and hear from experts how we can ensure that female members of the industry have evolved from being just a tick in the box and are bringing substantial knowledge when occupying senior and managerial positions. To take the conversation forward, I would like to introduce you to our panel members today. We have Anita Noori, who is the CEO, Business Development Director at Green Energy Solutions and Sustainability. Anita has been at the forefront of introducing sustainable solutions to the UAE and supporting the development of the first landfill gas-to-energy project in the region. Please give a big round of applause for Anita, ladies and gentlemen. Up next, we have Nadin Bitar. Nadin is a strategic and executive advisor on cities, sustainable development, and place-based planning. Please give a huge round of applause for Nadin, ladies and gentlemen. We also have Yannick Lewik, design manager at Bessex. Yannick is associated with the Uptown Tower project as the design manager for DMCC. Thank you for joining us on the panel and welcome once again. And our final panelist joining us on the panel discussion today is Aisling Goifoil, the project engineer and design manager at Atkins. Aisling has worked on some of Atkins's landmark project and was recently awarded the Next Gen Women of the Year 2021 award at the Women in Construction Awards organized by the Big Five Summit. Thank you for joining us today, Aisling. Thank you, everyone, once again for joining us. Now, I believe it is important to be discussing whether discussing about the underrepresentation of women in leadership level, while we also try to understand how can we overcome the barriers and the challenges. And on that note, I would like to quickly highlight something, and I would say that women have the ability, as we know, to delegate effectively, provide motivational leadership, and encourage team members to work together towards the success of an organization. Reflecting on this, I would like to know from each one of you, how according to you has the industry evolved to hire or rather promote more women in executive and managerial positions? Let's start with you first, Anita.
Well, I think over the years, what's happened is that women have found their voice. And they've allowed themselves to find their voice. I think that we tend to, as women, historically take the back position, and now we've sort of stood up and said, no, wait, why can't we lead? And I think that that's thank you to the generations that have come in the 60s and 70s and 80s who have enabled their young daughters to stand up for themselves and to enter into the STEM education and told, like I tell my daughter, you can do anything that you want. Don't ever, if someone says no, find another way if that's really what you want. And you have to follow your passion. And that's how I've led my life. And I think that there are more women now that are able to do that and work alongside the men.
Yeah, and it's also about creating the example, like how you are doing it. I hope that also creates examples for others. Coming to you, Nadin, do you think that there has been progress when it comes to the involvement of women in leadership roles, and how has it changed, and what has your observation been as an advisor over the years?
I think that we are in a very interesting times because we are facing multiple crises at the same time. We have the climate crisis, we have the technology crisis, we have the health crisis, and we also have the crisis of intergenerational equality and equity. And in face of these crises, Darwin always says that the species tries to survive. Women, in particular, have this instinct of survival. They are trying to protect their communities. And I think I've seen it for the past 10 years that women are rising up to the challenge of bringing their voice up, like my colleague have said, but also how we can find innovative solutions for these crises. And this is the value we bring to the table when we take on leadership roles and also positions on boards. We bring value in terms of understanding that creativity, innovation are going to save not only us, not only the organization we work in, but also the planet that I hope is going to be saved soon.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and very interesting points there. And reflecting on those, I would like to come to you, Yannick, and understand, because you are often at the site as a project manager. How have things been different, when you look at past and you look at the current scenario in the sector?
In my case, I'm coming from Europe, and where, in fact, this wave already started 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I started my career on site when I was 25 years. It's already 25 years I'm on site. And for me, I never see the barrier to be a woman on site. Because, and I always say, we speak about mentorship, but I've always have men supporting me in my job. I'm on the field, and today my duty, I've been 4 years leading the construction team in Atlantis, for the Royal Atlantis. Now I'm on Uptown Tower. I will leave, I will work for V6 on the Guggenheim Museum. And my duty today is to show to my team we are all equal. We can be a draftsman, we can be an architect, we can be an engineer, we can be a woman, a man, we can come from everywhere in the world, and they have all the same opportunity. And that's my task today.
That's very, very, very well put. And I would say it's important as a leader to set the right example for the next generation as well. And I think that's what we discussed in the previous panel too. Coming to you, Ashley, you've been with Atkins for a bit now. And as a project engineer, what is the sort of inspiration that you get, when you look at women in leadership positions? And what would you like to see as a change in the future?
Well, since I started off, I suppose in the last 10 years, I'm pretty novice in my career compared to the three ladies I have here beside me. And it is, as to evoke what Anita said, it's your generation who stood up and wanted their voice to be heard that allows me a pathway to maybe ride on the tailcoats of what you've beaten the path and been pioneers in the industry. So thank you for doing that on my behalf and anyone else at my level and lower. So within Atkins, we still have a lot of gender diversity to achieve. We're taking it seriously now. We're probably a bit more behind the rest of our offices in in the globe compared to the UK and Europe, where they're a lot further ahead than what they were, where investment was put into encouraging girls like myself into STEM careers, and that evolved into engineering or IT, etc. Here in this region, what we have is, I think it was alluded to with other companies, we have an ED&I remit to achieve. Our CEO has appointed a vice president for this, so that is her job is to make sure across the globe, including the Middle East, to have inclusion, diversity and equality. And I think we have a bit of a way to go, but we're starting, and it is a journey that we've just commenced.
Yeah, and I think a key point and takeaway from this, the first question would also be about what Anita mentioned. It's also about, taking and driving the passion that you have for anything that you do, and that is equally applicable for the sector, and that is where you're setting the right tone. Now, highlighting a few things here, according to women's empowerment principles by UN Women, both women and men workers should get equal pay, and this we've discussed previously as well, for work of equal worth. But I want to understand from each one of you, how has the construction industry fared in terms of offering competitive packages for women in leadership roles in the boardroom as well as on-site? Let's start from you, Anita, once again.
Well, for me, this is a difficult question to answer because construction is traditionally and will always be a male-oriented industry. It is something that we have to accept this. But does it mean that we accept this on all levels where pay comes into the discussion? And I don't think that a person's salary should be reflected by their gender at all. It should be blindly on their ability to deliver what they're there to deliver. So if you're breaking into the industry and you do a good job, you get paid for that job and you grow into the industry, it should not be just because you're a woman. It should not be affected by the bottom line. So the question that was posed about this was from me, actually, and I didn't mean to make it anonymous. I was going to write my name, but it just went out. But I don't like to hire anyone just to save money. Like, why am I hiring this woman just to save money? I'd want to hire the right person for the job and pay them for that job. Yeah. So I think there's still a long road to go. For myself, it's a little bit different because our company is a developer, and it was established by my husband and myself. And I pay myself more than I pay my husband, so. Because I do the groceries. Yeah.
Very interesting points there. And I think it is also reflects of what Shuruk, Olga, Jane and Amir mentioned in the first panel discussion. It should be about talent and not about gender. So I think it rightfully fits what you said. What are your thoughts there, Nadin?
I think that I'm going to take a different stand. I'm a very big believer of well-being economy, and whoever is familiar with that, economy systems are being disrupted, and we are not going to have GDP or profit being the only bottom line. We're going to have also well-being, health, and mental health also as the bottom line. And therefore, pay is not the reason or the source. We are treating the symptom. The real source is our economic system is disrupted, and therefore we shouldn't talk about gender pay, we should talk about value. What is the value that we're bringing to the table? And each and every organization that is looking to put women on boards or in leadership position, they should be interested in the value that they bring. What is the value? First, sustainability. Women are the custodian of sustainability, and we are seeing it in multiple international organizations. We're reading on biodiversity, we're reading on ecosystem restoration, we're reading also on social sustainability. Black Lives Matter. So, and the Me Too movement. So this is one value. Second, context. We are transforming our societies. And when you put women on boards, and you actually see the value in transforming the culture inside the organization, this is way beyond the dollar sign.
That's very well put. I think the very intriguing insights there where you mentioned about value and compared with the pay gap that we are facing in the industry. And I think it's also about what Olga mentioned earlier in the panel about it's not just gender, it's culture, it's ethnicity. So again, coming to you, Yannick, what are your thoughts? What would you like to share with us about this discussion here?
I would like to share my practical experience on my career. At the end, I'm coming in this moment in a company where we don't have a difference in salary. If you are a woman or man, it depends on your competence. And during all my career, I achieved to have my salary for my work. And I think if you are able to demonstrate your capacity, you can achieve to have the same salary. I didn't face this issue. But of course, you have to demonstrate that you are able to have the same position than a man or another person, another country. I've been working in several countries, several companies, and I have always have to fight for my salary myself, and it's possible.
Yeah. Coming to you, Aisling, do you think there are times when women, and I say this because we discussed this earlier, you have to prove yourself more than men at a point, so that you are able to be at a point that we are getting equal pay. Do you think that is still the case, or have you seen a change in the past 10 years in your career?
I think that depends on the individual's perspective on it. For me personally, like Yannick has just said, I've never felt underpaid compared to a peer of a different gender to me. However, from listening to other ladies' stories, it can be the case. you know, there is anecdote like that. I would fight for my ability in that. But I suppose there is a part where you might be, you know, we go through certain changes every month that you might not be able to attend work that day, or you might not be brain fog, etc., where you'd come back the next day and you'd have to maybe do 2 days of work, which wouldn't be applicable. So I suppose all in all, I think is the perspective that you take. I've never let anyone say put a dollar sign beside my ability, and if I do feel that I deserve something, I go for it. But that's not necessarily all the case with everyone I know.
Yeah, and I think it's, yes, please.
Yeah,
Anita.
I'd like to also add something else that we should consider. This pay gap is also regional. In this region, I think that we have a little bit more of a challenge and a bigger fight that we have to fight, and a real proof that we have to prove that we are here with a voice and we're moving. And I think that it is growing fast, but Europe is an example where, or North America is an example where the challenge is not as big as it is in this region. I mean, it is something, salaries in general in this region are lower. We always have to justify what we get paid and what we pay. And economically, the whole world has been struck, so that is also another challenge. So when you add all of these together, the important thing is you have to have a voice for yourself. You have to speak up for yourself. And, you know, these are all just little points.
Can I follow up on
please,
this? Because I'm someone who 4 or 5 years ago believed that the change comes from the masses. Now I believe change comes from the top, from leadership. I have to say that in some countries in this region, we had leadership at the top that are pushing through some great policies. For me, one of the greatest was putting women on boards. And I do believe that when women are on boards, we are going to solve things more creatively. Now, the second thing, which I want to also comment on, which I think even in Germany, only 20%, if I'm not mistaken, of women that constitute 80% of public sector are on boards. What we need is more board representation, and I think it will tackle in all regions of the world this issue of what you said.
Yeah, I think it also brings us down to what we discussed in the first panel about policies. You know, if you are not aligning your policies the right way, if you are not introducing new policies to make sure that the process becomes organic, it is still going to be a challenge, like how Anita and you mentioned here. Now, talking about challenges, you know, the road to leadership is obviously not easy, like how we discussed. And there are times when this is often a result of certain pressure that organizations and stakeholders have had in the past to fill percentages and quotas. So I would like to come and understand from each one of you, what are your thoughts about this? And do you think that this scenario has changed in the last couple of years, or it's still the same? Let's start with you first, Aisling.
I kind of blanked out. Can you repeat that?
So I want to understand if it's still the same when it comes to situations where, you know, there are certain stakeholders who follow, you know, a pressure of certain percentages and quotas that they need to fill in the organization. Do you still think that is the case, and what has your experience been like?
Well, it clearly is the case because we're talking about it, and everyone that got up on this stage today did say that they've basically a KPI to meet, that they want to have X amount of women on boards, etc., which is only true and fair. So yes, I have, and I think it's very evident in the Northern Hemisphere, where, you know, STEM career grassroots have come to fruition, where you have people like me here today in mid-level. Now, in this region, we're far behind, and I think in the last few years, I have seen an increase in female presence. Particularly, I was working on a design and build project for Atkins. On site, we had a chief architect who's a female. We have a resident engineer who's a female. And we have, definitely Atkins have made a point of appointing people that are able to do the job, but also happen to be female. So yes, you can. Now, I suppose the main concern for me is there's a tipping point where I would like to be elevated to a position because of my ability, not because of my gender, which is, it's a fine line to meander. But I think the more we talk about it, the more we recognise there's faults also in meeting quotas, we can attain that. It doesn't get to that point that you don't have imposter syndrome if you're at a leadership level.
Yeah, very interesting points there. And I think I also agree with you on this point, because there was this time when we had a discussion during International Women's Day, and a couple of the senior members of the industry, as well as people who've entered the industry, agreed on the same thing. You know, it's at the end of the day, the ability and talent. So if you have that, then the numbers are just numbers. You need not be looking at them. Coming to you, Yannick, with more than 25 years of experience, like how you said, in the industry, how do you think this scenario has changed over the years?
We can see a big improvement on site. Today, in my team, I have almost 30% of women working with me. We have a site manager, package manager, we have a design manager, and we start to have work. That's a new change. We have more workers in the work front already in Europe, but as I always say, that it's a matter of will. The good things of the construction industry is that there is a lot of work that can be learned very quickly, and that a woman can do. I've painted myself my house, I've plaster, I know how to tile. Then a woman can do it, but it's just a will. And then for me, we have to work more in education and to show that this job can be done by women. I'm speaking really in the work front, no in the office, because we can, of course, now on recruitment, we are achieving in basics 50% of women on new position, but still not on site. And at the end, the company has to help the women who have the interest to enter in this type of trade and to give them the opportunity for training.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way of, overcoming all the challenges that we've faced in the past, so that we don't encounter them, in the future. But coming to you, Nadin, you spoke about value, when we were talking about pay gap. So tell us, if you still see, and what are your thoughts about the percentages and quotas that companies are sometimes obliged to follow in order to, have more female representation in leadership roles or across the board?
There are many things that have changed over the period of my career, which spans 2 decades. The first challenge, at least when I started, was getting into the university. In the program where I joined, we were only 3 female and 50 male. So the percentage of people getting into the education system was low. Now, this is across, I come from the Arab world, so I'm going to speak from my region. Our region is not one single entity. We have Levant, we have GCC, and we have North Africa, and then we have also the Maghreb countries. So our region, because of its different disparities, have different levels of educational attainment. But across all, at least in my generation, the issue is getting through the university into these very hardcore, male-dominated industries. But then the second challenge, I think, was, at least I'm speaking early 2000s, were really how we can progress in the career and how we can reach middle management. Because at that time, most of the jobs offered for women were actually architect, senior architect, and maybe urban planner, urban designer. We didn't really have development jobs or construction jobs. And then I would say mid-2000, it started to become how you can actually be leading teams. And I have to say, in the Levant, women have always been leading architecture companies, their own SMEs. But in the GCC, this is becoming more, so we have amazing now architects leading their own companies. So the issue is not only within corporates, how do you raise, but also how do you open, like the talented lady we have here, open your own business and stay on top of that business in an industry where you have to compete also with the big guys, right? So that's the other aspect. I think now we have two challenges. One is, I'm going to say it again, the boards, the executive teams, now that we are having more booming economic activity in the GCC, but also we have North Africa booming, where Egypt is booming. I think soon we'll have the Maghreb countries booming, and hopefully Syria will be rebuilt and Iraq. So how do we get more women involved in these very important economic cycles, not as owner of their own companies, but also as ecosystem builders? How we can build the ecosystem to build good environments. I love this comment about good environments, because a good environment for women is a good environment for children, is a good environment for elderly. It's also a good environment for people of determination. So we want to be ecosystem builders, not only recipients of quotas.
Very insightful points there, Nadine. And reflecting on what Nadine said, I know, Anita, you were agreeing, you were nodding in agreement, but as someone who sits, at the helm of a company, and when you look into the industry, are we solving the challenges in the right way, and are we doing that, towards the right direction when it comes to women in leadership roles?
I don't. I think we are heading in the right direction. I think that for me, the benefit of being a woman is that we tend to be more flexible. We tend to be more adaptive in our approach to things. And as you said, being on a board is a very important area that women should be able to work, like I said before, alongside men, because we think differently. And thinking differently is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, because it allows the right decision to be made, because you can ask the question where a woman might ask a question more than another man would to another man. So it adds diversity, and that's an important place for that to happen. Flexibility as a woman to be able to change. So my company is a developer of a landfill gas to energy project. That's a challenge in this region. So I've also taken on a role of consulting and talking about sustainability, what it actually means, how sustainability should become easier, and how to build a path and show people what is ending up at the landfill. You're all welcome to come and see the landfill in Dubai, by the way. And so that you can make those changes and make sustainability simpler. And what is net zero? How are we ever going to reach that? Are we only talking about it, or are there actions being put into place? So this role has also been developed because I had to be flexible. If I just sat and tried to do energy from landfill gas and connect it to the grid, it's a difficult path, because there is not proper legislation, not proper regulations. It's easier said than done. But as a woman, you sort of find your way like through the maze.
Yeah, and I also believe you are at a point where you have to make a lot of technical decisions. So coming back to what we were discussing, could you also tell us, how difficult has it been, for someone like you who's the CEO, you was the CEO of an organization, to make such decisions?
I think that you can make it as difficult as you want for yourself. I never found it difficult. I work alongside and with the government of Dubai, and it's not an easy thing, but I never looked at it as if it's easy or not easy. I'm a solution-oriented person, so I'm coming there to not tackle a problem for them, but to find and make what they do better. And if I can make something better and have an idea or a solution and can deliver on that, then that's a good thing. I never really looked at it as a challenge, or the fact that if I'm a woman and I'm talking to a man, it didn't really matter to me. I didn't put that barrier. And as my friend here said, I also can drive loader and a D9, and I can do, we had an asphalt paving company in Canada, so I can drive the spreader too, so I did all that stuff.
Yeah, I think
I can build you a parking lot if you want. And it's fun for me. Like, nobody ever told me you can't do that.
Yeah,
so don't put barriers on yourself, whether you're a man or a woman. Don't ever put barriers on yourself.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said about, having the right passion and also making the right choices. If you don't do that for yourself, then it will be difficult, and only through that you are setting right examples for the next generation as role models. Coming to you, Yannick, I want to understand how Basics is developing gateways for women to enter into the construction sector. And as a leader yourself, how are you seeing this change happen across the organization?
In all the sites that we have around the world, we are working deeply to have people from all the sects, race, levels of economy levels. We really work to have an integrated team. Our value, the value of the company is based on respect. And I think the respect starts in the education. It starts in your family. And then you adapt this respect on your work and with your team. And on the recruitment side, everywhere we are recruiting between 150 to 200 new engineers. Of this number, we have 30 to 40 master degrees. And today, as I've explained before, we have 50% are women. And yes, of course, we have implemented several actions in the company. We have a competence banding. That means any position in the company, it's determined by the qualification of, and it's neutral, that we want to ensure the equality. Then we have equal salary. It's a salary, it's determined by a position. We have an action that I like, it's the KIDI formation. It's we go, or new engineers are going to school to explain how exciting is our job, what is the construction, and we try to work with the school. I've bring on site a student of 15 years in training with me because they have to do their training for the school during 15 days. We are motivating the new generation to know what is the construction, because in general they know what is architecture, what is design, but know what we are doing. Myself, I like to explain to school how we build our site and to explain how we do, because it's in general, everybody knows the Instagram of the architect, and the designer, the interior design, but nobody knows how we do it, how we build it. And I think it's the most exciting of our job, because we work several years to think how we will build it, and then 6 years after you see it finished, no? We work too, of course, with the university to really give transparency of all the tasks you can do in construction, and I think it's one of the most motivation for the new generation. And inside the company, everywhere anyone can apply for training. Yeah. We have a website, and we can go ourselves and request a training. to, of course, mentorship. As a woman in the company with a front position, I try to help the other women to see that they understand that it's possible. They can grow inside the company, they can grow inside a site. But I think it's a lot of time, it's a fair.
Yeah.
Women are fair to achieve new position, and we need, I think we need to improve more training for women to be more confident.
That's right, yeah. Coming to you, Aisling, and just reflecting on what Yannick said here, it's always about having an integrated team, you know, to make the processes organic. And I know we'll be discussing about recruitment later on in the next panel, but what are your thoughts about this?
About what particularly? Sorry, it's a very open question.
I think it was a long answer. So I want to understand from you on how things have changed, you know, over the years when it comes to the recruitment process, you know, and hiring more women in leadership role. And for you particularly, because you've been with Atkins for a while now, how has it changed in terms of strategizing better, you know, when looking at the leaders of the future?
Okay, I suppose, well, Tom will elaborate more in the next session. But from my point of view, what I do know, being a female there, is they have an enhanced maternity leave compared to the local laws and regulations. So have longer paid leave. They have flexi time, which obviously became as part of everyone's core, I think, way of working after COVID. And we do have like a mentor group internally. Now, COVID has disrupted that where we've all been working remotely, and it's been over 18 months now. So now that we're all back to the office, predominantly we're going to try and resurrect that again. We do intend in the future, I suppose, to reach out. When I say in the future, I mean it just hasn't happened yet. We're still on COVID regulations, and where we're reaching out to universities like every other business here. For me, it's more so the culture that's within Atkins that makes it appeasing to, I suppose, the female part. And I don't know, is that predominantly we are more known as an architectural place here. So we have a very pretty office with live plants and stuff, and it's a nice ambience to be in. Yeah. And some of my architecture colleagues, you know, it's more of an inclusive feeling there. There seems to be more of a tribe feeling, which is nice, and wants you to turn up to work every day.
Yeah, and it's also about creating the right opportunities and equal opportunities, you know, for the sector. I mean, only if you do that will you be able to see more women in leadership roles. And I'm conscious of time here, so I would like to know your final comments on, you know, are we there yet when it comes to, you know, bringing more women and promoting more women in leadership roles? And if not, what is that we need to do more, you know, and work aggressively on? Let's start with you first, Nadine.
I think the first thing I want to say to women is leadership is earned, not given. This is something I've learned through many years of experience. And it would not be given to us on a golden plate. We owe it to the generation of women behind us, and of course, coming like the talented lady with us here, that we need to perceive ourselves as leaders. It's not others who will perceive us. We perceive ourselves as leaders. And to be a leader, the first thing we need to know is the value we bring to the table. Ask yourself every day, what is the value I generated today for my organization, for my community, for my family, for my neighborhood? Because being a better human being every day pays off.
Yeah. Coming to you, Aisling, what are your final thoughts, and what do you think needs to be done more in the construction sector and architecture sector in particular?
I think, for me, my own experience is encouragement needs to start at the home. I think by the time you get to the teens, you may have lost some females who would be considering STEM or civil engineering or engineering as a career path. For me, I was actively encouraged to go out and rough it with the boys. I know that probably is not very PC at the moment in our current global restrictive conversations that you can have. But for me, I was always encouraged, like Anisha's doing with her family, is it doesn't matter if you're female or not. So for me, it would be, I suppose, when you're dealing with your niece and nephews, make sure that, oh, you can also be an engineer, we can do that. And it's outreach maybe to primary schools we need to look at, have little event days and that. Also, legislation will help that the UAE has now rolled out in KC that there's mandates that women do need to be in the construction industry, which is also going to help. But I think we need to look at early grassroots nurseries, kindergartens, encouraging, science and STEM abilities that we can do it, and we can do it probably sometimes, if not better, if we put our minds to it, that it should be an option.
Yeah, it's about creating the right awareness, isn't it? What about you, Anita? What are your final thoughts? What more should be done in this sector? And
I think that a leader, like you said, is not. It's a privilege, and a leader is not just a job. So as someone who hopefully is a leader, it's teamwork, and you're only as good as the team. And it doesn't mean that as a leader you'll say, okay, you do this and you do that. You have to be there with them doing it. So roll up your sleeves and be part of the team and help that team lead you into a leadership position. Because you are only as good as you are around you. And that comes with everything in life, and even with the initiatives and that they're trying to achieve here, and the targets, the aggressive targets that they've set, because 2030 sounds like a long time from now, but it really isn't. But all of that, the leadership of this country is counting on us to all be leaders with them, to make those changes, to actually ask the questions. Where do we throw this garbage? Where do I throw this bottle? Why do I have a recycling station that's so far away? And how many bags of plastic am I supposed to collect at home before I take it and find some place to throw it? Ask those hard questions. Don't be shy. Lead yourself into a leadership position. That would be my ending thought.
Rightfully put there, and I think it's also about being the change that you want to see, and that is rightfully so. Any final thoughts as well from your side, Yannick?
My last message. I would like to say that it's for the new generation that you can have a family working on site. I have 3 boys. I'm coming from a family of 6 girls. And it's a beautiful industry. It's an industry with evolving every day. After 25 years, I'm still learning. I have to go out of my comfort zone a lot of time. I need to find solutions very fast, and it's really exciting every day. Every day you learn some things, you do something new, and I think it's the message we should give for the new generation, because it's a beautiful work.
Yeah, and I think the message is well heard, loud and clear, I would say. On that note, that's all the time we have on the discussion today, but we will now be quickly taking the questions that is being sent by our audience. So I think I will give the first one to you, Anita. What are the social responsibility related policies within your organization as women culturally carry the burden of the household? How do you address equity? You can talk to us about a perspective of yourself as a CEO.
So what? Say it again.
It says, what are the social responsibility related policies within organizations, and as women culturally carry the burden of household, how do you address equity in the construction industry in this case?
I mean, to address that, you have to not, I'll use an expression that they use in North America, don't cubbyhole yourself. So don't put yourself in a little box and say, oh, well, this is my job. I didn't, I say it to my children all the time, like I'll come home and the kitchen sink is full of stuff. And I'm like, why? And when I left this morning, it was empty. Well, I didn't drink that coffee. I didn't do that plate. In life, you can't say that. You have to, okay, we go for a walk in the desert and we see plastic on the ground. Do we cover it with sand or do we pick it up? So with everything in life, don't put yourself in the "this is not my job" position. It's all of our jobs. And the only way that the world will move forward is if we all support each other, whether it's in industry-wide and renewable energy. I mean, solar isn't the answer. Wind is not the answer. Waste to energy is not the answer. But all of them together might be the answer. So why not support each other? There is space for everybody. The consultants, there are 10 different huge consulting companies. All of them should open up to each other, sit together, make each one's specialty help and support each other. Yeah. The world has become a place where we have to support each other, and COVID has been the big teacher of this lesson. It didn't matter who you are, if you're a man or a woman, if you're Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu, everyone was affected. Whether you're rich or you're poor, everyone was affected. So that was a lesson to say that we're all the same. We have to work together. And that's the only way. I mean, I hope I answered that question. I also there you go.
Yeah, I think, I mean, reflecting on what you said and how we mentioned about collaboration again being the key for the construction sector.
Yeah, in everything.
It is about supporting each other. I mean, even for gender, if the male members are not supporting female members and female members are not supporting other female members, you will not see the change. So
yeah,
that's
as a woman, don't only help women, help the men, and the men should help the women. Everybody should help each other.
Help each other, absolutely.
We should stop seeing gender and color, and we should just see people.
Yeah, and I will take one more question because we are running short of time here. And I think this I will ask for Nadine to answer. What are the difficult choices or challenges you faced while rising through the ranks? And how can we as an industry reduce the clear roadblocks?
Of course, the one that was raised the most is work-life balance. We are nurturers. At one point in our age, we need to take care of our parents, not only our children. And for me, one of the biggest decisions and choices I had to make when I was in the height of my career was taking some time off to assist my mother who was in a terminal illness, and alhamdulillah, she's now fine. But I think that we need to always honor our values in terms of family bearer or family nurturer. So that's one of the difficult choices. The second difficult choice is one that is, I think every leader will be asked this question: authenticity. How true the way we make choices are aligned with the values we say we are adhering every day. So authenticity would be the second most difficult choice. And in many points in my career, especially as I became more into leadership position, authenticity was the main leveler, whether I go with that route or that route. And in that aspect, I think when we talk about future cities or sustainable cities or place-based planning, we really need to embrace authenticity in every client meeting, in every project, in every program, in every design, in every team meeting, but also we as an industry, we have been not very authentic sometimes with our clients. And as someone who worked with the public sector, private sector, local authorities, big consultancy and small consultancy, the ecosystem has to shift into more authenticity.
Yeah, very intriguing points there. And on that note, that's all we have, I'm afraid, from this panel discussion. And thank you so much once again, wonderful women out here, for joining us on the discussion today and making some very interesting points clear for the industry and for many of the other leaders who are sitting here and many of the women who want to be the aspiring leaders of the future. I think it's rightfully the examples that needs to be learned. So thank you once again. Thank you so much. Well, I would say there are always challenges on the road, aren't they? And then we just heard from all of our panelists on, how they have overcome challenges, through the years. But I believe there is always a beacon of light at the end of the tunnel, and that is where we are heading. We are chasing the light, and that is where we want to be as an industry. On that note, I would like to move on to our final panel discussion of the day, where we will explore why retaining women and not just hiring them in the construction sector is critical to the growth of the industry. And to moderate this discussion, I would like to once again invite Disha to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ranju, for the reintroduction. Now, as we enter the final leg of today's event, we are all set to discuss the hiring and retention of women in the construction industry. Now, this is important because we've obviously in our previous panel spoken about women across leadership roles. But let's not now go beyond, just hiring them and why it's also essential to retain them and make sure that they're not opting out of their workforce. Now, amplifying gender diversity and inclusion is a task that is inclusive by its very nature, and this is something we as a brand at Construction Week truly believe in. And we are always calling for action from all members of the industry, irrespective of their gender. And with that, I would like to welcome our first panelist on stage, Tom Ilham, Talent Acquisition Director, SNC Lavalin in the Middle East. Thank you for joining us on stage, Tom. Now, a bit of a background. Tom, of course, has been working to attract the best talent in the region to work at SNC Lavalin over the last 8 years. He is also a member of the Regional Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee at SNC Lavalin, helping shape a more diverse and inclusive workplace. Thanks again for joining us, Tom. Next, we are joined by Nadine Halabi, who is Business Development Manager at Dubai Business Women Council. Let's give her a round of applause as well. Thanks for joining us today, Nadine. Now, in her capacity at the council, Nadine helps drive success by adopting a startup style of management, one that fosters innovation and fuels an environment in which women feel motivated to innovate, create, and thrive. Thanks both for joining us today. Now, I have to say, what an apt and fitting finale to the conference this is. And no pressure at all on both of you. But I'm glad to be joined by both of you to explore ways in which, hiring and retention, recruitment and retention rather, should be pervasive and organic for the industry. Of course, we spoke about the tick box exercise, but we're going to be exploring a lot more. So we're also glad that you've stuck around, and we hope you're enjoying the conference. So let's begin with you, Tom. I'd like to understand what efforts is your organization, SNC Lavalin, taking to rewire the industry's mindset to turn it into not only a recruit, but also a retention space as well. How are you? Do you think that's important? Does the industry need a bit of a rewiring?
Thanks, Disha. Nice to meet you all. Good afternoon. I think, as a lot of people have already said, this is a journey, and it's a long journey, and I think for the region we are really only just starting out at the moment and trying to make some positive inroads. From a recruitment perspective, I've been in recruitment for the last 20 years, and I think the challenge I've always faced in the last few years is that leadership would talk the talk, but they wouldn't walk the walk. And I think that's meant that there has been a need for us to put in some KPIs in our industry to ensure that our leadership has a target they have to achieve, and that, certainly from my perspective in recruitment, I can hold them accountable for achieving those targets. So I think they're really important, firstly. I think as an organisation, I'm very fortunate that I have a CEO that takes ED&I extremely seriously, and he's now got a diverse board in Montreal, so we have 30% women on our board of directors. We've recently appointed a VP of ED&I globally as well, so We're looking at regional action plans at the moment, and I think the Middle East is on a different trajectory to other regions. So all of those things are going to help me in attracting the right talent into our industry. I can hold people accountable. We can put KPIs and measures in place to get more female talent into the organisation. I think retention is probably a far greater challenge, and I think we're doing some things right in terms of influencing policy change to ensure that we retain women in the workforce, but we're certainly not there. I think a lot more work needs to be done in that place. I think we as an organisation need to be more authentic, and we need to talk about the successful women in our workplace and make sure that that talent attraction strategy really talks to females, whether they're graduates, apprenticeship, leaders, that they know that SNC is doing something to bring women into the workforce, keep them there, keep them engaged, an inclusive culture where they feel that they can be successful. So, yeah, we're only just starting. There's a lot to do, but we're taking some positive steps.
It's a good start. And Tom, you mentioned something about, talking about successful women in the workplace. And that's something, Nadine, is what Dubai Business Women Council is striving to do. So I want to understand from you just how is the council creating opportunities for women across sectors to ensure that they're more employable within the industry, but are also retained?
The capacity of the Dubai Business Women Council is basically being a platform for professional women to come together and develop and hone their personal and professional skills. So what we do at the council is we make sure that we curate industry-specific workshops, seminars, forums that will help support our members, and we have around 700 members representing different industries. And what we want to maintain is to make sure that they keep coming to the council and they keep getting access to those skill developing workshops or sessions that will enable them to become better versions of themselves. Because any working person, whether it's a woman or a man, it's not enough to just stay stuck where you are and say, okay, I'm in a senior manager position or I'm in a leadership position. I don't need to grow. I don't need to develop myself. Development, learning, honing skills, it's all part of the process, and it needs to be ongoing regardless of gender. So the Dubai Business Women Council, what we do is basically we take care of our own in the sense that we're always providing ongoing weekly sessions, trainings, even networking opportunities that will help these women connect with like-minded men and women, grow and develop their skills through these industry-specific, beautiful sessions and workshops, and at the same time give them the extra support with initiatives of our own, which are basically focusing on entrepreneurship, as in like acceleration and incubation programs, mentorship programs, as well as diversity and inclusion platforms where unfortunately we do not create any policies, but we set the stage to create best practices or best practices forums where professionals, men and women, come together and talk about what they can do to retain women, keep women in senior positions, whether it's policy related or environment related in the workforce or what have you. So all in all, it's all about providing the learning, the ongoing access to learning and development, mentorship programs, and of course, connecting our members with a like-minded network that they can learn from and grow with.
Right. Now, since it's all about asking the hard questions, I have one for you, Tom. Do you believe that companies that incorporate gender diversity and inclusion at the workplace are doing so because of a certain pressure to reach reach numbers or fill percentages? And how can we as an industry make sure that this approach is more organic?
I think the pressure needs to be there because we need to change the dynamic, don't we? So I think, as I mentioned earlier, targets need to be in place in order to facilitate change, but it's how do you design a strategy that underpins those percentage targets. And I think, it's really important that all organisations weave ED&I into everything they do in their organisation. So, we should weave ED&I into the recruitment process. We should weave ED&I into our bids and proposals process. So we talk to our clients about what we're doing in terms of gender diversity. That's the first point. I think secondly, we need to break down the barriers in our organisations, all of us, to allow people to challenge the norm. And thirdly, we need to give people that voice. People need to be able to work in an inclusive culture where they're not afraid to speak up and say something. And to that point, I think we do safety moments as part of all of our meetings, and I had an HR leadership meeting a couple of weeks ago, and my safety moment was about menopause awareness. I think people should have the confidence to speak up about subjects that may be taboo or they're not comfortable talking about because of their gender or their age. We need to create that inclusive environment where people don't feel afraid to do that.
Right. Nadine, are you in agreement with Tom? Are we working from a place of pressure at all?
The thing is, I'm not really involved in recruitment, but what I see from our members who are in the industry, as well as other members from other jobs around us, there needs to be. See, the thing is, the way I see it is, the proper leadership plays a very, very important role, and with us at the council, we really try to involve the language of inclusivity in everything that we do, even when we talk about gender parity, and I love saying the word parity rather than equality for various reasons. When we do these best practices forum and we have a platform set to create a discussion around better policies or what can be done in retaining women in the workforce or putting women on boards, etc., we invite the men. The men are very important in the discussion.
Right.
So this inclusive culture is super important. We do it at the council, and I think it's the best way forward. You can't operate on 50% of society, and I think we need to stop. We need to stop being totally obsessed with just women empowerment and shift the focus into society's empowerment. I mean, it starts at home, it's reflected in the work, and it's like a ripple effect. So I think it's just about changing the mindsets. It's about putting on leaders who are inclusive and leaders who believe in teamwork and diversity on every level. And that will help a lot when it comes to recruitment. But I also feel that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And from my perspective at the council, there needs a lot of work to be done on shifting the mindset of people.
Right.
It's not just the policies alone. The policies alone will not work if the mindset is not there. Inclusivity, leadership, all of these, we need to work on the mindset and shifting it. And we need to start early. Very early. We need to start with children in schools. We need to make sure we reflect it in the homes. We have to be role models, whether we are mothers or fathers or brothers or sisters, etc.
Right. And I completely agree with you. I think inclusion, gender inclusion and diversity in itself is an inclusive exercise. And just to kind of adhere to that, we have to ensure that the approach is not superficial and, we are involving men as much as we are women in the conversation. Now, moving on to you, Tom, could you tell us a bit about how crucial are internships and graduate programs to ensure not just the recruitment, but also retention of women in construction, and maybe also give us a few examples of how SNC Lavalin is facilitating this?
Thank you, Tisha. I think before I go into that subject, a lot of panelists have said today that and Nadine's just said it now, that this starts much earlier than graduate intakes. This starts in the home environment, and it's about creating the right role models for our children as they grow up. I've got a daughter who's just about to turn 8 this weekend, and I want her to believe that she can do anything in the world. There are no there are no barriers, but unfortunately society creates these gender stereotypes, and you go into a clothes shop and you go to the left, the girls section, and all the clothes are pink and fluffy, and you go to the right and all the boys' clothes are Spider-Man and Batman outfits. So we need to go back to the root cause of it, first of all. And I think for us as an organisation, we're doing a lot in other regions, not so much here, to reach out to schools. So we do have an ambassador programme where we reach out to schools to teach young girls about STEM subjects, which is fantastic. We need to be doing more of that in this region. I think a lot of employers do. When we look at our early careers programmes, we have a graduate and intern intake across the region. More so the UAE and now Saudi Arabia as well. So they're really important for us. That's the lifeblood of our organisation and the future leaders of our organisation. And yeah, I'm quite fortunate that last week we had the graduation from our 2-year programme of 16 graduates, 60% of which were women, which is fantastic. As I said, we can still do more work in that space to encourage more women to come into the engineering space. So, yeah, we're kind of living and breathing that from an early careers perspective for sure, but there's always more we can do.
Right, but very positive insights there, Tom. Now, coming back to you, Nadine, you mentioned something very interesting about let's go beyond just women empowerment and let's now focus on society empowerment. And I think a major step in that regard is Dubai Business Women Council's commitment to the Women's Empowerment Principles by UN Women. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and just how, in your capacity, are you promoting women's leadership across businesses?
Okay, perfect. With relation to that, one of the WEP's principles that we are very passionate about is promoting education, training, and professional development for women. That's very important. But the beauty of what we do is, in that process, we're always inviting the men to come on board and help with that mission. So I'll give you an example. One of our flagship initiatives, which is our mentorship program, it is something that I'm so passionate about. And we've done so far 3 successful cycles where we were able to mentor over 100 of our members by pairing them up with industry pioneers. And most of the mentors that we reach out to and contact for help are men. And they usually do not hesitate to come on board and help us with this program. Now, the Council is a non-profit organization. We don't make money out of these programs, and we don't charge our members money to join the programs. All they need to do is just be part of our council, and then they'll have access to all these initiatives like Entrepreneurship Academy and mentorship and etc., which is part of the WEP's mission of promoting education and professional development. So the men are always engaged in all our initiatives, and they play a stellar role when it comes to supporting us. And it's something I'm very proud of. So if us as a council, we're focusing so much on that, in parallel to that, we're going to need some more support when it comes to empowering the rest of society, as you rightly said earlier. So empowering the society is, okay, we do our part, organizations do their part, the government and the leadership is certainly doing their part and more. And I speak with pride because I'm a child of the UAE. I was born and raised here, it's my home. And we see a lot of change considering it's such a young country. Right. And in comparison to other parts of the world where I have personally visited along with our president, Dr. Raja, and the board members, I think Dubai is in a very leading position when it comes to how we handle diversity and inclusion. And when we talk about challenges for women, our challenges here in the UAE are somehow a lot less than they are in Europe, for example. Right. So back to the point of what we can do for promoting these or shifting the mindset is also reaching out to the parents and the schools, which I think is super important, asking organizations to be more involved, whether it is internships, shadowing, and even mentorship, because that's the only way that you can create more awareness.
Right, right. Very valid points there. Now, I want to move back to you, Tom, to understand just what do you think of, we are all hinting at change, and that's why we are here today. But what sectors of construction do you see sufficient diverse and inclusive representation or participation in? And what sectors then of construction do you see that, suffer from a lack of the same? And maybe you could also go into the why.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'm part of the regional ED&I committee here, and we've been putting together our regional action plan over the last 6 months. And I needed to come up with some ideas of what I was going to change in the recruitment process. I was kind of thinking, okay, I can't just say to the recruiters across the board, you've got to recruit. You've always got to provide a shortlist that has 50% women in the shortlist, because I knew that wasn't possible. In some areas I can find female talent, in other areas I can't. So I did some analysis as an organisation to look at what percentages we had of female talent in different disciplines, which was really insightful. So in an engineering perspective, we're way short, so we're really not bringing enough female engineering talent into our organisation, and I assume that's the same across the region. Architecture and master planning, I think, as we said earlier, it's a fairly glamorous industry and attracts more women into that industry, more women going to university to study those subjects. So, we've got 36% as a percentage at the moment of female talent in that area. The biggest challenge is obviously site. How do you get more women working at site, getting exposure, whether that's through their learning and development programs to encourage them to have a site-based role for a period of time where they can see what it's like. But I've seen all too often men putting up barriers to stop women coming to site. Oh, we can't do this, we can't do that, it's not possible. I think it needs to be more inclusive, and people need to come up with more ideas to get that exposure for women on site. I mean, I think someone said earlier, we're never going to have a 50-50 balance of women and men on construction sites. It's not possible, but there needs to be more of it, and it needs to be a more inclusive environment. So, going back to the original point, I think it's very different depending on what part of the industry you look at.
Right. And it's also interesting to see that the industry is moving in the right path. Of course, like you said, it cannot be 50-50. It is probably a bit unrealistic to expect that to happen overnight. Progress takes time, but I think we are well on the right track. Now, Nadine, I understand that the Dubai Business Women Council supports the growth of female candidates across businesses, one of them also being construction more recently. Do you want to take us through the notable movements that the council has made in this regard, and also just how the council supports professional development of women in construction?
So one thing we launched during the pandemic, funny enough, is the DBWC forums, the Dubai Business Women Council forums. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a dialogue with professionals from different industries, and we wanted to highlight what the challenges that women were facing, what were the challenges that women were actually facing in those industries, but also provide solutions. And when I say provide solutions, I feel it's so important that at all these events where we're having these amazing discussions and we're having these great speakers and panelists on board who can share so much of their expertise, it is so crucial that we actually provide tangible solutions to these challenges. Because at the end of the day, this is what people want. If an entrepreneur is in the room and she's having some kind of a problem or a challenge that is affecting her performance at work or the way her company is performing, etc., and she's actually making the time to come and be at an event like this, what she wants as a takeaway is, I want to listen to solutions. I don't want to sit in a room and listen to things that I can easily find by Googling that person. That's the difference. And from there on, when we created the DBWC forums, of course, I worked very closely with organizations on a partnership basis, because I come from a mindset where I believe a lot of magic can be created if people come together, and I believe in the power of partnerships. One of the forums that was done during the pandemics was actually partnering with the Big Five and having an online forum that discussed and highlighted the problems or the challenges that women in construction were facing, and having professionals from the industry offer solutions to these specific challenges that they were discussing. And not only that, but we also did another forum about women in tech. We did that in partnership with one of our partners, Visa. And we also collaborated, and we had the DIFC, the FinTech group, also join us. Aside from that, we even tapped into another industry which many people think it's not a challenge for women, but surprisingly it was, which was the industry of retail and luxury. Mm-hmm. So when you have the CEOs of Sergio Rossi, Breitling, Pomelato, for example, and a powerhouse like Inji Shalhoub, who represents Dubai, on that panel talking about the challenges that the women are facing in those industries, it really sets the tone, and it makes you realize that no, there are challenges, and does not really have to be only related to male-dominated industries. There are industries that are that do have obstacles for women, but we do not consider them that much of a problematic industry. But in fact, they do have some kind of issues. So the council is very passionate about creating and putting together these forums because you talk to real people and you get tangible solutions to a lot of the challenges that many of the people can relate to.
Right. And it's interesting because you've both addressed efforts and opportunities in this regard, but let's now move on to talking about the concerns. And I'm sure you'd agree that there are a couple, which is why, again, we're having this discussion. Now, are you both seeing candidates opt out of the workforce, female candidates opt out of the workforce? Why do you think this is happening, and how can firms strategize to retain their talent? Tom, I want you to answer this with a recruiter's lens, of course.
I don't see, to be honest, I don't think I see any difference in the genders in terms of people opting out of the workforce. I think obviously COVID has created this situation where people have made the decision, you know what, do I want to be doing this anymore? Maybe there's more to life and I'll go and do something else. So I wouldn't say, and we've certainly not noticed anything that's gender specific. I think maybe there is a glass ceiling from a gender perspective that we see when we struggle to get women into really senior leadership roles, and we get women to the stage where they get to management, mid-management, but then they struggle to find something beyond that. Maybe that's the time that they do decide to opt out, or think that maybe there's another organisation where they can go and work. So, but I'm not talking from direct experience, really, I suppose. Mm-hmm. I think, there's things we need to put in place to ensure that that doesn't happen if it is. So it's important that we have an inclusive working environment, which I've talked about before, and we've got policies and procedures that support everyone in our organisation, men or women.
Right, interesting. Now, Nadine, I want to understand from you just what is the Dubai Business Women Council, as well as yourself, doing in your capacity to offer solutions so that candidates, female and male alike, are not opting out of the workforce?
Okay, one of the most dominant things that I've seen at the Dubai Business Women Council through our female members is many women have left the workforce for some time because they needed to spend more time raising the family or being there for their children. Mm-hmm. I am a mother, actually. I'm a single mom of two, a 16-year-old going on 25 and a 12-year-old boy. So I have a girl and a boy. And it is tough. It is challenging. So for somebody who takes time off to raise the family and comes back to the workforce, it's very challenging because a lot happens in such a short period of time. And we're living at a time where things are moving in a very rapid way. So the challenges that these women face is, first of all, they leave the workforce to take care of their families. They want to move or transition from working for an organization versus becoming an entrepreneur. And the reason why, because we ask them, is they like the flexibility, they like being their own boss, and they like managing their own time. So by being an entrepreneur, to them, these women are somehow resolving one of the challenges that they're facing, which is, especially if they're mothers, they can balance between working and making the time to be at home. What we do in terms of support is we connect them to people through our diverse networking platforms. We continue on honing their business and personal skills through the diverse and ongoing workshops and trainings that we do. We provide them with the best access to mentors through our mentorship program. We provide them with accelerator programs and incubators through our entrepreneurship academy. So we try to bring to the table as much as we can to try to create that support system for the working community. But I do believe, and I know it for a fact from our members, that it is not easy for a woman. It's not easy for a mom, it's not easy for a single woman, it's not easy for an entrepreneur, it's not easy for somebody who's working for the government or for a private company. It is still a challenge for many reasons, many of the various reasons that were discussed in today's panels. But when we try to cater to these problems and we try to address them by offering solutions, I think it's always putting us in a place where we're always moving one step forward. But again, it's super collective. Everybody needs to come on board with that.
Right, 100%. Now, before we wrap up today's panel and then, of course, open the floor to audience Q&A, I'd like to understand from both of you, and let's take a forward-looking approach. We've discussed the UN WEPs earlier today, during this panel as well. Now, the Women's Empowerment Principles by UN Women promotes the implementation of a gender-sensitive recruitment and retention practice across just all workplaces. In both of your opinions, what do you think companies should do to ensure that workplaces are gender-sensitive while creating their workplace policies and while drawing out recruitment practices? And just how can we change our approach as an industry? I'll have you go ahead first, Tom.
Something we adopted a couple of years ago in the recruitment process was to introduce gender-neutral job descriptions. I've seen over the years so many mistakes in job descriptions that reference men and not women, and I think there's lots of language in there that we live in a society with so many nationalities where English may not be the first language as well. So we introduced some gender decoding software a couple of years ago that recruiters can use when they're advertising their positions. Removing some of the remarks about that may be gender specific or may allude to someone from a certain background. So I think that's an important step we've taken in the recruitment process. Something else that we've been doing for the last few years is unconscious bias training, and I think this is an area that everyone in this room has to challenge themselves on a weekly basis, because we all have unconscious biases, whatever they may be about. We need to notice our own biases. We need to speak up when we notice other people's biases as well. I think that's crucial in order to create more equity across genders. So those are two really key areas for me.
Right. Nadine, I saw you nod.
I agree with him on a lot of things, although I'm not an HR specialist, but I do agree.
But I'd like to understand, how are you supporting the change the industry wishes to see, and in your capacity, how are you supporting this change towards a gender-sensitive recruitment workplace?
See, in our capacity, it takes on a different role. It's about the learning and development, which we completely stress on always developing. It's we work closely with organizations, whether it's the private sector or the government sector, to ensure that even if we can come on board and support in any way possible through our partners or our speakers or our previous facilitators, to make sure that these organizations always have access to the best learning and development modules or training programs, etc. Because we believe it's very important. It's also something that we are very, in our discussions with the organizations that we work with, we always make sure that We try to pinpoint the fact that sometimes women have a problem with the confidence. I mean, they know things from a theoretical perspective, but there's something that's just not there when it comes to the confidence level. Maybe they are considered threatened in a room full of men. Maybe they feel that they won't be up to the task. Maybe it's just the environment of the workplace that makes them feel that way. So improving their self-confidence, providing them with a more gender-neutral working environment, putting more importance on learning and development, as well as, I agree totally with what you said about bringing on the unconscious bias training, which I think should be really crucial. And of course, in my personal opinion, I also feel that they should be better staff retention when it comes to the hiring part of companies. So I think all these components together, again, my capacity at the council is not an HR, I'm not an HR professional, but from the discussions and the conversations that take place, these are common denominators that need to be addressed.
Right. Very good points there, both of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the panel today. I think it's lovely to be seeing both of you engage in a conversation that needs to be done. And as I mentioned earlier, diversity is the need of the hour, and there are no two ways about it. Here's also hoping that the next time we all sit down together for a conference like this, we will be part of a more empowered society, as you had correctly mentioned before, Nadine. Now, I'd like to move on to the audience Q&A. So the first one is from Marwa Ahmad, who I believe we had as a panelist as well earlier on. Now the question for whoever wants to take this is, how are leaders held accountable if and when they show gender bias behavior? I'd like for both of you to weigh in on this.
I'll speak first if that's okay, Nadine. It's a difficult one. I think we need to empower people to be able to speak up and have a voice, because I think it's difficult for anyone if the CEO's in the office and they say something that you're like, okay, I'm not sure I agree with that. We need to work on how we create that inclusive environment where people feel that they can speak up, and that's a journey. I think it's not an easy one, but I have seen instances of colleagues who have spoken up, and it actually has facilitated some positive change, or at least made leaders think more. I challenged my boss the other week because a couple of comments he'd made that I said, well, okay, I don't think really we should maybe think differently and not air those opinions. So I think it's happening, but it's not easy. We just need to create that environment where people don't feel afraid.
I agree, yeah. And there are some organizations where, let's say, for example, they want to see the feedback of the team with relation to their bosses with them or their managers. And they put together surveys that remain anonymous. Maybe that helps also, because then again, people can feel more comfortable saying what they want to say without being afraid of the consequences. So it's that confidence level, it's maybe anonymity to a certain extent could boost up that confidence level and make it less threatening, perhaps.
Right, and have you also had to face, some sort of gender bias from the leadership level? How have you had to tackle with that, if at all?
Myself
have you faced anything of this sort just through your career?
Actually, personally, no, I have not that much.
Which is good news.
Which is great, because you see, I work for an organization that is partially under the umbrella of the government. So, and I proudly say this, as a child of the UAE, I grew up and I saw this country prosper and develop in ways that it just makes my heart more and more proud with the years. I never really felt that growing up. I never felt a lot of discrimination. I never felt that there was much of a difference between a man or a woman, and that's my personal opinion, as well as those that I grew up with, my friends. I mean, I had Emirati friends that I went to school with, and they actually went to university. They decided to go and specialize in a certain major, and nobody actually stood in their way. And it got better with time because of the leadership. The leadership believes in 50-50 somehow. They believe in empowering women. They believe in empowering society. And they're actually not just saying it, they're acting on it. And we can see it. I mean, I proudly say that, I mean, look at us today. The UAE has a space program for the youth. I mean, if we're talking about encouraging children and honing their skills from when they're young, they're doing a tremendous job here.
Right.
I think, personally, I have not encountered a lot of that bias.
Right. And I think it's all about also not just talking about it, but going one step further and putting it in practice.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Now,
just to add to that, I think I've been very fortunate. I've never experienced any of that, but I'm middle-aged, white, male, so I probably wouldn't have done. But I can be a voice for others and other minorities, and I can speak up because I have the opportunity to do that. So I think it's really important that we, if we are more privileged than others, that we take that opportunity to support those minorities that may have different challenges to us.
Right. And Tom, while we are still talking about leadership, behaviors, policies, patterns, I want to understand from you just how can we, and this is one of the questions from the audience, how can we shift the mindset of current leaders in the industry to create the changes that are needed to address gender parity?
Oh, that's a huge challenge, and I don't have all the answers for that. I think, I suppose, if I'm talking from a recruitment perspective, it's recruiting the right people into the organisation so that when we do have leaders, we have a robust recruitment process that identifies talent that has all of the technical skills and all of the soft skills that we need in a leadership role. And for me, leadership needs to be authentic, and I've seen so many leadership teams in the organisation that I work in that haven't been authentic, and they're happy to put the sticker on to say we've done this, we've achieved that, but when you scratch below the surface, they're doing it because they want to win more work or make more money or increase the size of their bonus. I want to see authentic leaders in my business, and I'm fortunate we've got a new CEO in the region that I believe is authentic, and I think it's down to us to make sure we bring that right type of talent into the organisation to affect positive change.
Right. Nadina smiled when I said
I wanted to add
parity.
something to what you said. I
Right.
totally agree with you. Leadership should be authentic, but there's also something very important that I always mention whenever I get the chance. Leaders should also be human. They should be more human. They should be more empathetic. Emotional intelligence, empathy, all these things, they are going to become a rare commodity. At the rate that things are going and how we're progressing with all this craziness happening around us and with all these crazy changes taking place, we are slowly losing the human factor. I mean, how can you be a good leader if you're not human? And being human has no gender. It shouldn't be female or male. No, we need to all do that and adopt this kind of mentality. And also, when we talk about mindset, it's very, very important that we involve the youth, because you can't just have a mindset just by clicking your fingers and saying, okay, now it's going to happen now. We need to start them young. We need to start with schools, with the youth, in our homes, in the organization's cultures, everywhere. It should be a collective job, but at the core of that, we need to be more human.
Right.
That's my opinion.
Right. On that note, once again, thank you so much, both of you. I think here's to change, and here's to bringing change, driving change together as an industry. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me, and as I said, this is quite the fitting finale to our conference today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's have you stand for a quick group photo as well. Actually, I think that's fine. We'll have you go. Thank
Thank you. I think we'll have you, once you've exited, we'll have you stand by the media wall and we'll do one there, so you don't need to have it here. Thank you so much. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Disha, for leading the discussion, and many thanks to Tom and Nadine for your time and such captivating insights, I must say. Now, I believe that providing the right environment where people can grow and thrive is central to the growth, sustainable growth, I would say, of the sector. And women are the ones who benefit the most from such an environment. And I believe if there are more women in an organization, they have a greater chance of progressing into leadership roles. Now, as we call it a day with some power-packed panel discussions and such thought-provoking keynote speech, I would like to thank you all once again for joining us today and for being part of our conversations. We are elated to have brought this conference to you today, and we believe that through today's discussions, we have identified the key issues surrounding women's representation in the construction sector. And in doing so, we have pushed industry stakeholders to realign their workplace policies by making them gender equal. On that note, let's also give a huge round of applause to all our speakers and to all of you who've joined us today. Let's also not forget to thank our wonderful sponsors and partners for their support, which also includes our Platinum sponsor, RMD Quickform, event sponsor, Kandil, and UN Women as our partner for the inaugural Women in Construction Conference. Please give them a huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Now, on that note, I hope that you enjoyed networking sessions and all the conversations and discussions that we have had here, and I hope you found them insightful. We will see you again next year for the Women in Construction Conference 2022, and we hope to bring you all an even more exciting and engaging conference next year. So thank you once again for joining us. It was wonderful hosting you all today, and have a lovely day ahead.